Hey friends, welcome to the Horror Sleep. Almost 90% of you watching aren't subscribed. If you enjoy these true park ranger horror stories, hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Oh, and where are you watching from tonight? Let me know in the comments. I'm Ethan Cole, and before I share this story with you, you have to know one important thing. Wind River Range. This isn't like other backcountry. The high points are at 11,000 feet. Everything changes. And that includes the oxygen. The oxygen itself feels alien. Your brain mists in its own tempo. Your outlook changes. In some cases, you witness what you just can't. I was a ranger for the Bridger-Teton National Forest for 3 years until I met June Hartley. She showed up at Yellowstone in the spring, business as usual, no joke. Although I'd developed my own sense for the wilderness, June was equipped. GPS, altimeter, compass, satellite phone. She bragged about being redundant. You can't rely on your feelings up here, she told me on our first patrol. At this altitude, people get stupid. It's your gear that will keep you alive. I didn't try to resist it. June was right, I think. But then I also understood your equipment might mislead you, and all you can rely on is your inner voice, telling you to turn back. It was mid-July when we got the call about Crystal Lake. A solo hiker named Marcus Drummond had activated his emergency beacon 2 days prior. Search and rescue had extracted him by helicopter the same afternoon. He was physically fine. No injuries, no hypothermia, well hydrated. But Marcus wouldn't stop talking about the footprint. Just one, he kept saying, according to the report. Right at the water's edge. Barefoot. Human. But there was no second step, it just stopped. The psychiatric evaluation at the hospital in Lander noted altitude-induced confusion and possible early-stage HAPE. High-altitude pulmonary edema. The doctors recommended rest and a return to lower elevation. Case closed. Except District Ranger Bill Ashford wanted us to check it out anyway. Probably nothing, Bill said, spreading the topo map across his desk. His office smelled like old coffee and pine needles. But we've had 3 beacon activations in that drainage this summer. All of them solo hikers. All of them confused. I want eyes on that lake before we get someone actually hurt up there. June leaned over the map, her finger tracing the trail. 12 miles in. Camp at Timberline Creek. Then another 4 to Crystal. 2 days up, survey the area, 2 days back. What are we looking for? I asked. Bill's expression was hard to read. Anything that doesn't belong. We left the ranger station in Pinedale at dawn, June's truck loaded with more gear than we needed for a 4-day patrol. She'd triple-checked everything the night before, marking each item off her laminated checklist with a satisfaction I found both admirable and slightly obsessive. The trailhead at Boulder Lake sat at just over 9,000 feet. Tourists clustered around the parking area taking selfies with the Bridger Wilderness sign. Their laughter seemed too loud, too carefree. I wondered if any of them knew about Marcus Drummond and his impossible footprint. Ready? June adjusted her pack straps, her movements precise and practiced. Let's go find a ghost, I said. She gave me a look. There's no such thing as ghosts, Ethan, just explanations we haven't found yet. The first 6 miles passed easily. The trail wound through lodgepole pine forests, crossing meadows bursting with wildflowers. Indian paintbrush, lupine, columbine. At this time of year, the Wind Rivers were impossibly beautiful, the kind of beauty that made you forget how quickly they could kill you. We gained elevation steadily. My lungs worked harder, pulling in the thinning air. June moved ahead with mechanical efficiency, her pace never varying. She'd grown up in Colorado, spent summers climbing 14ers with her family. The altitude didn't bother her the way it bothered most people. Around noon, we stopped at a creek crossing to filter water. The map called it Elk Fork, though I'd never seen elk this high. The water ran crystal clear over granite cobbles, snowmelt from the peaks still feeding it even in mid-July. June pulled out her GPS unit, checking our position. On track, another 4 miles to Timberline Creek. I knelt at the water's edge, watching my reflection ripple and distort. Something about it seemed off, but I couldn't say what. The angle of the light, maybe, or the way the current seemed to flow in 2 directions at once. "You okay?" June asked. "Yeah, just..." I shook my head. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Even then, some part of me knew. We reached Timberline Creek by late afternoon. The creek lived up to its name, flowing through a landscape where the trees gave way to alpine tundra. Above us, the peaks of the Wind River Range scraped the sky, their summits still holding last winter's snow. June selected our campsite with the same methodical precision she applied to everything. Flat ground, away from the creek in case of flash flooding, with sightlines in all directions. She erected her tent with a military efficiency, while I set up my own more haphazardly. "You should use a footprint," she commented, watching me stake out my tent. "Keeps the moisture out." "I like to feel connected to the ground," I said. "You'll feel connected to pneumonia if you're not careful." Dinner was freeze-dried stroganoff rehydrated with filtered creek water. We ate in comfortable silence, watching the alpenglow paint the peaks orange and gold. The temperature dropped fast after sunset. At 10,000 feet, summer nights still flirted with freezing. June checked her weather radio. High pressure system holding, clear skies for the next 48 hours. "Good conditions for tomorrow," I said. "Perfect conditions," she corrected. "Nothing should go wrong." That's when I should have said something. Should have mentioned the weird feeling I'd had at the creek crossing. The sense that something was watching us from the rocks above camp. The way the wind seemed to carry voices just below the threshold of hearing. But June didn't believe in feelings, and I didn't have anything concrete to offer. So I kept quiet. We turned in early, planning to leave for Crystal Lake at first light. I lay in my sleeping bag listening to the creek and the wind and the immense silence that fills the high country after dark. No traffic sounds, no human voices, no electric hum. Just the mountain and everything that lived on it. I must have slept, because the next thing I knew, June was shaking my tent. "Ethan, wake up." Her voice had an edge I'd never heard before. I unzipped my sleeping bag, fumbling for my headlamp. The LED beam cut through absolute darkness. According to my watch, it was 2:47 a.m. "What's wrong?" "My compass," June said. "Look at it." I crawled out of my tent. The temperature had dropped below freezing, my breath fogging in the headlamp beam. June stood there in her base layers, holding out her compass. The needle was spinning, not drifting, not seeking north, spinning in lazy circles like it had given up trying to find anything at all. "Magnetic anomaly," June said, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "There must be iron ore deposits nearby. Lodestone, maybe. Have you ever seen it do that before?" "No." We stood there in the darkness, watching the compass needle turn. Above us, the stars blazed with the intensity only possible at high altitude. So many of them they formed a continuous river of light. The Milky Way stretched from horizon to horizon, and for a moment I felt the full weight of how small we were, how alone. "Should we turn back?" I asked. June looked at me, and in the harsh LED light I saw something I'd never seen in her face before. Fear. But then she squared her shoulders and shook her head. Equipment malfunctions happen. That's why we carry backups. She pulled out her GPS unit, powered it on. The screen glowed blue in the darkness, satellite bars showing full signal. See? We're fine. GPS says we're exactly where we're supposed to be. And if the GPS is wrong, it's not wrong. That's the whole point of GPS. 24 satellites, trilateration, accuracy within 3 meters. The compass is just a backup. We don't need it. I wanted to argue, but what would I have said? That the spinning compass felt like a warning? That some instinct was screaming at me to pack up and hike out right now in the dark before something happened? June wouldn't have listened. And honestly, I wasn't sure I would have listened to me either. "Get some sleep," June said. "We leave at 6. She returned to her tent and I crawled back into mine. But I didn't sleep. I lay there in my sleeping bag, listening to the creek and the wind and the silence and thinking about Marcus Drummond's impossible footprint. Dawn came slowly at 10,000 feet. The sky lightened from black to purple to pink, and finally the sun crested the eastern peaks, flooding our camp with light. I felt better in the daylight. The night's unease seemed foolish, the product of altitude and darkness and too much imagination. June was already up, brewing coffee on her camp stove. She'd checked all her equipment, run diagnostics on her GPS, and consulted her backup compass. The backup was working fine, pointing steadily north like compasses are supposed to do. The other one must have been damaged somehow, she said, though we both knew that didn't make sense. Compasses don't break. They're literally just magnetized needles. There's nothing to malfunction. But in the morning light, with coffee warming my hands and the peaks glowing gold around us, it was easy to believe the rational explanation. Easy to ignore the part of my brain that kept insisting something was wrong. We broke camp efficiently, hanging our food bags from a tree to keep the bears out while we were gone. The plan was to make Crystal Lake by midday, spend the afternoon surveying the area, then return to camp before dark. 4 miles, June said, studying her GPS. Should take us 3 hours with the elevation gain. The trail climbed steadily from Timberline Creek, switchbacking up a granite headwall before leveling out onto a high plateau. This was true alpine country now, above 11,000 feet, where nothing grew taller than your knee. The air had the crystalline quality of extreme altitude, so clear it seemed like you could see forever. June set a steady pace, breathing hard but controlled. I followed, my lungs working overtime in the thin air. At this elevation, every step required conscious effort. Your body wanted to stop, to rest, to retreat to somewhere it could actually breathe. We didn't talk. Talking required too much oxygen. An hour into the hike, June stopped abruptly. She was staring at her GPS unit, frowning. "What is it?" I managed between breaths. "We should be at the creek crossing by now, right here." She tapped the screen. "But I don't see any creek." I looked around. She was right. According to the map, we should be crossing Alpine Creek, a major drainage flowing down from the basin above. But there was no creek. Just dry granite and scattered patches of alpine tundra. "Maybe it dried up," I suggested. "If the snowpack was light this year, the snowpack wasn't light. Look!" June pointed up at the peaks. White snow plastered every summit, more than enough to feed a dozen creeks. We stood there trying to make sense of it. The GPS said we were in one place. Our eyes said something different. "We keep going," June decided. "GPS doesn't lie. We must have taken a wrong turn somehow." But we hadn't. The trail had been clear, well marked, impossible to miss. And yet here we were, in a place that didn't match the map, following coordinates that led nowhere we recognized. That's when I heard it. A voice, very faint, coming from above us. "Did you hear that?" I asked. June frowned. Hear what? Someone calling out from up ahead. We listened. The wind moved across the alpine plateau, making that hollow sound wind makes in high places. But underneath it, or maybe woven through it, I could swear I heard words. Someone calling for help. There, I said. Did you? It's just the wind, June interrupted. Sound behaves weird at altitude. Echoes come from the wrong direction. You hear things that aren't there. Or we hear things that are there and can't figure out where they're coming from. June checked her GPS again. Crystal Lake should be just over that rise, half a mile. We climbed. My head had started to ache. That dull pressure behind the eyes that comes with altitude. Each breath felt insufficient, like I couldn't quite fill my lungs. June seemed unaffected, her pace mechanical and relentless. At the top of the rise, we stopped. Below us lay a lake, but it wasn't Crystal Lake. It couldn't be. The water was the wrong color, dark green instead of the crystal blue that gave the lake its name. The shore was wrong too, ringed with boulders that formed strange geometric patterns, like someone had arranged them deliberately. And the size was wrong. Crystal Lake was supposed to be maybe 50 yards across. This was easily twice that. That's not it, I said. June stared at her GPS. According to this, we're standing right at Crystal Lake. Coordinates match exactly. But that's not the right lake. There is no other lake up here. Look at the map. Crystal is the only alpine lake in this entire basin. She was right. I pulled out my own map, the paper kind, and confirmed it. One lake, one drainage, one trail. We should be looking at Crystal Lake. But we weren't. June started down toward the water. Let's check it out. Maybe the map's wrong. Maybe it's been updated and we have old information. I followed, but every step felt wrong. The boulders around the shore weren't natural. They were too evenly spaced, too deliberately placed, and the water itself barely moved. No ripples, no current, just that dark green surface reflecting the sky like polished glass. We reached the shoreline. June knelt, testing the water temperature. That's when I saw it. The footprint. It was exactly where Marcus Drummond said it would be. Right at the water's edge, pressed into a patch of sandy soil between two boulders. A human foot, barefoot, toes clearly defined. The print was fresh, probably made within the last day or two. But there was no second print. No trail leading to it, no trail leading away from it. Just one perfect impression, as if someone had materialized at the water's edge, stood on one foot, and then vanished. June, I said quietly, look at this. She came over, saw the print, and went very still. That's impossible, she whispered. We both stared at it. The print was too clear to be a hoax. Too detailed to be an accident of erosion. I could see the arch of the foot, the pressure points where the weight had pressed deeper. A real human foot had made this print. But where was the person who'd made it? June pulled out her camera, photographing the print from multiple angles. Her hands were shaking slightly. There has to be an explanation. Someone hiking barefoot, maybe. They stepped here, then step back into their exact same footprint going the other way. That's why we only see one. That's not possible, I said. Look at the depth. You can't step backwards that precisely. You'd see some distortion, some overlap. Then what's your explanation? I didn't have one. I had a feeling, a deep certainty in my gut, that we needed to leave this place immediately. But I didn't have an explanation. June circled the lake, searching for more prints. I stayed at the shore, studying the single footprint and the dark water beyond it. My reflection stared back at me from that glass-smooth surface, and I had the sudden disturbing sensation that it wasn't quite my reflection. The proportions were wrong. The angle was wrong. I looked away. "Ethan," June's voice came from across the lake. "Come here." I found her standing at a gap between two boulders. She was looking at something on the ground. Another footprint. Left foot, same size as the first, also alone. "There's more," June said. She pointed up the slope. "I found 6 so far. All single prints, no pairs, no trails. Just one print, then 20 feet later, another one." We spent the next hour mapping them. June used her GPS to mark each location, photographing and documenting everything with the methodical precision she brought to every task. We found 14 footprints total, scattered around the lake and up into the basin above it. All of them were isolated. All of them looked fresh. And none of them made any sense. "This has to be some kind of hoax," June said finally. "Someone's messing with hikers, making fake prints to freak people out." "Why?" I asked. "We're 12 miles from the trailhead. Who would come all the way up here just to make fake footprints?" "I don't know, but the alternative is impossible." The alternative was that someone had walked around this lake, taking single steps that left no trace of the journey between them. The alternative was that the normal rules of physics and biology didn't apply here. The alternative was that something was very, very wrong. The sun had reached its zenith, flooding the basin with harsh alpine light. We should have been eating lunch, resting before the hike back to camp. Instead, we stood at the edge of this wrong lake, staring at impossible footprints, while June's compass, the backup, the one that had worked fine that morning, began to spin. She didn't notice at first. I watched the needle accelerate, turning faster and faster until it was just a blur of red and white. "June," I said, "your compass." She looked down at it. The blood drained from her face. "Check your GPS," I said. She pulled it out. The screen showed our position, but something was off about it. The coordinates were changing, drifting, even though we weren't moving. The altitude reading climbed, 11,400 feet, 11,600 feet, 11,800 feet, even though we hadn't taken a step. "That's not possible," June whispered. "GPS doesn't just malfunction like this. It's satellite-based. It's telling us we're climbing," I said, "even though we're standing still." We looked at each other, and I saw my own fear reflected in her eyes. "We need to leave," I said, "right now." For once, June didn't argue. We packed up quickly, hands shaking, not bothering with her usual systematic approach. Just stuff everything in the packs and move. I took one last look at the lake. The water was perfectly still, that dark green surface like a mirror. My reflection stared back at me, and I was certain now it wasn't quite right. The proportions were wrong, the angles didn't match, and then, just for a second, my reflection moved without me. I blinked, and it was normal again. My imagination, the altitude, the fear. But I didn't look back as we started up the trail. The hike back to camp should have taken 3 hours. It took 7. At first, we couldn't figure out why. June set the same pace we'd maintained on the way up. Steady, mechanical, sustainable. I followed in her footsteps, trying to control my breathing, trying not to think about the impossible footprints and the spinning compass and my reflection that had moved on its own. But after the first hour, we still hadn't reached the spot where Alpine Creek should have been. The creek we hadn't found on the way up, but that should definitely be there on the way down. "We must have missed a turn," June said, but her voice lacked conviction. "There's only one trail," I said. "Then we're going slower than I thought. Altitude's affecting our pace." But it wasn't that either. I'd been watching her GPS, watching the numbers change. According to the satellites, we were moving. The coordinates were updating, distance to camp was decreasing. The GPS said we were making progress. The landscape said something different. We kept passing the same granite outcropping. I noticed it the first time because of its shape, like a crouching bear, frozen in stone. The second time, I thought maybe we'd gotten turned around somehow. The third time, I knew something was seriously wrong. "June, stop." She turned back, irritation crossing her face. "We need to keep moving. We're losing daylight. We've passed that rock 3 times. "What rock?" "That one. The one that looks like a bear." June looked at it, looked at her GPS, looked back at me. "That's impossible. We're following the GPS. We're moving in a straight line back to camp." "Are we?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out her satellite communicator. "I'm calling for extraction." But when she tried to activate the emergency beacon, nothing happened. She pressed the button again. Nothing. "Battery must be dead," she said. "You checked it this morning. It had full charge." "Then it's malfunctioning. Like the compass, and the GPS altitude reading, and the fact that we keep passing the same rock even though we're supposedly moving in a straight line." June's jaw set in that stubborn way I'd come to recognize. Equipment fails. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything is failing at once, all of it. Every piece of technology you rely on. "Then what do you suggest? We can't just stand here." I looked up at the sun. It was moving wrong. Too fast, too far west. We'd left Crystal Lake at what should have been early afternoon. The sun had been nearly overhead. Now it was touching the peaks, beginning its descent toward evening. 4 hours had passed, maybe 5, but it felt like only 1. "The sun," I said. June followed my gaze. I watched her do the math, watched her face go pale as she realized the same thing I had. Time was wrong. "We need to set up camp," I said. "Right here, right now. We're not at Timberline Creek. We don't know where we are." "Exactly. Which means we need to stop moving before it gets dark. Before we're really lost." For a long moment, June didn't respond. She stood there, GPS in one hand, dead satellite communicator in the other, while the sun raced toward the horizon and the wind picked up that hollow alpine sound. Then she nodded. "Okay, we camp here." We found a relatively flat spot between boulders, out of the wind. June's hands shook as she set up her tent. I'd never seen her rattled before. She was always the steady one, the rational one, the one who trusted equipment and procedures and protocols. Now, all of that had failed her, and she didn't know what to do. My tent went up faster than hers. I'd always relied more on instinct than equipment, and right now my instincts were screaming that we needed shelter before dark. I didn't know why. I didn't know what was coming. But every nerve in my body was telling me to hide. By the time both tents were up, the sun had vanished behind the peaks. The temperature dropped like a stone. Within minutes, my breath was fogging, frost forming on the tent fly. "We should eat," June said. But neither of us was hungry. Instead, we sat between our tents watching the stars emerge. They came out fast this far from any light pollution. Hundreds, then thousands, then so many they formed a continuous glow across the sky. I tried to find familiar constellations. The Big Dipper should be to the north. Cassiopeia. Orion would be below the horizon this time of year, but Scorpius should be visible in the south. I couldn't find any of them. "June," I said quietly. "Look at the stars." She looked up, and I heard her breath catch. The stars were wrong. The patterns were wrong. The Milky Way cut across the sky at an angle I'd never seen, and the constellations, if they were constellations, didn't match anything in my memory. "That's not possible," June whispered. "Stars don't just rearrange themselves. Maybe we're looking at them from a different angle, different altitude, different—" No, that wouldn't change the constellations. That's not how stars work." We sat in silence, staring up at an alien sky. The temperature continued to drop. It had to be well below freezing now, cold enough that I could feel it through my down jacket. And then I heard them. Voices. They were faint, distant, but definitely voices. People calling out, searching for something. Or someone. "Do you hear that?" I asked. June nodded slowly. "Yeah, I hear it. Search party, maybe? Looking for us? We've only been missing a few hours. No one knows we're in trouble. No one would be searching yet." But the voices continued. Sometimes they seemed to come from the west, sometimes from the east. Sometimes they echoed off the peaks in impossible ways, arriving from multiple directions at once. I pulled out my headlamp, swept the beam across the landscape. Nothing. Just granite and snow and darkness. The voices stopped. We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the wind. Then June spoke, her voice small in the darkness. "My GPS is still working. It says we're at 10,400 feet. Coordinates match our camp at Timberline Creek exactly. But we're not at Timberline Creek." I know we're not, but the GPS says we are. And if the GPS is right, then—" She trailed off. "Then what?" I prompted. "Then the world is wrong. Not our equipment, the world." I didn't have an answer for that. How do you respond when someone suggests that reality itself has malfunctioned? We sat there a while longer, neither of us willing to be the first to retreat to our tents. As long as we sat together, we could pretend this was just a camping trip that had gone slightly wrong. Equipment failures, navigation errors, nothing that couldn't be fixed in the morning. But we both knew better. Finally, June stood. "Get some sleep. We'll figure this out in daylight." "June, what?" I wanted to say so many things. That I was sorry for suggesting this trip. That I should have trusted my instincts at the creek crossing. That we should have turned back when the compass started spinning. But none of that would help now. Nothing. Sleep well. She ducked into her tent, and I heard her zipping it shut. The sound of her settling into her sleeping bag. I should have gone to my own tent, but I couldn't make myself move. Some instinct kept me rooted to that spot, staring out into the darkness. That's when I saw it. A light, maybe a quarter-mile away, moving slowly across the slope. A headlamp, I thought at first. Another hiker, but no, the light was too big, too diffuse, more like a lantern, or maybe a small campfire. As I watched, it stopped moving. Then it started coming toward us. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to call out to June, but something stopped me. Some deep, primal instinct that said if I made noise, the light would find us faster. I switched off my headlamp, sat in darkness, watching that glow approach. It moved like nothing I'd ever seen. Not walking, not quite floating, just progressing. Getting closer at a steady rate, weaving between boulders, climbing slopes that should have been too steep. When it was maybe 100 yards away, I could make out details. It wasn't a lantern or a fire, it was a person. A glowing person, luminescent in the darkness, trailing light like a comet trail, and it was looking for something. The figure moved in a search pattern, quartering back and forth across the slope. As it got closer, I could hear it. That voice I'd heard earlier, calling out. But now I could make out the words. "Hello? Can anyone hear me? I'm lost. Please, I need help." Marcus Drummond's voice. I recognized it from the recording they'd played at the station when Marcus had called in his emergency. The same cadence, the same inflection, the same desperate edge. But Marcus was safe in Lander, recovering in the hospital. He wasn't here. He couldn't be here. The glowing figure came closer. 50 yards now. Close enough that I could make out features. A man's shape, hiking clothes, a backpack. Close enough that I could see it wasn't quite solid. The light didn't come from any external source. It came from within, as if the person was made of light. "Please," Marcus's voice called out. "I've been walking for days. I can't find the trail. Someone help me." The figure was 20 yards away now. I could see its face. Marcus's face, but wrong. The proportions were off, like my reflection in the lake. The eyes were too large, the mouth too wide. A mask pretending to be human. It stopped at the edge of our camp. Those two large eyes swept across our tents, across the space where I sat frozen in darkness. I held my breath, didn't move, didn't blink. The figure's head tilted, bird-like. "Is someone there?" I didn't answer. It took a step forward. "I know you're there. I can hear you breathing." Which was impossible. I was holding my breath. The figure smiled, and that's when I knew for certain it wasn't human. The smile was too wide, showing too many teeth. Teeth that were too sharp. "Come out," it said in Marcus's voice. "Let me see you. We can help each other. We can find our way down together." I still didn't move. The figure stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, slowly, it began to turn away. "Okay," it said. "I'll keep looking. But I'll be back. I know you're here. I can feel you." It walked away, that steady gliding motion, trailing light. I watched until it disappeared over a rise, until the glow faded from the sky. Only then did I let myself breathe. I should have woken June, should have told her what I'd seen. But what would I have said? That a glowing person wearing Marcus Drummond's voice had just walked through our camp? She'd think the altitude had gotten to me. Hell, maybe it had. I crawled into my tent, zipped it shut, and lay in my sleeping bag staring at the tent ceiling. Every sound outside made my heart race. The wind, the occasional crack of shifting ice, the voices that continued faintly in the distance. I didn't sleep. I'm not sure June did either. I could hear her moving in her tent, restless, probably checking her equipment over and over, trying to find some rational explanation for where we were and why none of our technology was working correctly. Dawn came slowly, the sky lightening from black to gray to pale blue. I waited until I could see clearly before unzipping my tent. June was already up, her tent packed, gear organized. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair tangled, her hands shaking slightly as she rolled up her sleeping bag. "We're leaving," she said, "right now. We follow the sun east. Forget the GPS, forget the trail. We go east until we hit the highway. That could be 40 miles. Then we walk 40 miles. I'm not spending another night up here." I wanted to tell her about the glowing figure, about Marcus's voice, about the feeling of being hunted, but I didn't. She was barely holding it together as it was. We packed in silence, shouldered our packs, and started walking. June had pulled out her backup compass, the one that had worked fine until yesterday. It pointed north, steady and reliable. We headed east. The sun was ahead of us, rising over the peaks. The sky was clear, the air cold but not unbearable. In daylight, everything looked normal. Alpine tundra, granite boulders, patches of snow. Just another day in the Wind River Range. Except it wasn't. After an hour of walking, we should have been descending. The eastern side of the range drops away toward the highway, losing elevation quickly. But we weren't descending. We were climbing. "This is wrong," June said. But she kept walking. Another hour, the terrain didn't change. We passed the same granite outcroppings, the same patches of tundra, and then, ahead of us, I saw it. Water. Dark green. Glass smooth. "No," June whispered. "No, no, no." But there it was. Crystal Lake. Or the thing pretending to be Crystal Lake. We'd walked for 2 hours in a straight line east, and we'd come back to where we started. June dropped her pack, pulled out her GPS, stared at the screen. "It says we're 23 miles from here, 23 miles east, but we're here, we're right here." I looked at the shore, at the boulders arranged in geometric patterns, and at the footprints. Dozens of them now, hundreds maybe. All single prints scattered across the sand like someone had been dancing a strange one-footed dance. Fresh prints, made since yesterday. "Something's keeping us here," I said. "That's not possible." Neither are those footprints. Neither is a GPS that says we're somewhere we're not. Neither are stars that don't match any constellation we know. June sat down hard, her back against a boulder. "What do we do?" I looked around the lake, at the basin rising above it, at the peaks that ringed the horizon. That's when I saw them. The other lights. In daylight, they were harder to see, but they were there. Glowing figures, dozens of them scattered across the slopes, some near, some far, all of them moving in search patterns, all of them calling out. Different voices now, not just Marcus, a woman's voice, a child's, an old man's, all of them asking for help, all of them claiming to be lost. And they were all closing in on us. "June," I said quietly, "don't make any noise, don't move." "What? Why?" "Just trust me." She followed my gaze and saw them. I watched her face go white. "What are they?" she whispered. "I don't know, but they came looking last night. One of them found our camp." "What did you do?" I stayed quiet. It left. We sat there, backs against the boulder, watching the glowing figures quarter back and forth across the slopes. They moved like search dogs working a scent, systematic and patient. One of them came close, a child's figure, maybe 8 or 9 years old, trailing that eerie inner light. It called out in a high, clear voice, "Mom? Dad? Are you there? I'm scared. I can't find the trail." The voice broke my heart. But the thing speaking wasn't a child. I could see that now, in daylight. The proportions were wrong. The movements too fluid, too inhuman. It passed within 30 feet of us, close enough that I could see its face. Or the thing it wore instead of a face, a mask of features that almost looked human, but not quite. Like a sketch drawn from memory by someone who'd never actually seen a person. It moved on, its voice fading into the distance. "They're looking for us," June whispered. "I think they're looking for anyone. Anything alive. Why? I don't know." We waited until all the figures had moved away, their lights fading into the distance. Then June stood, brushing off her pants with shaking hands. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we need to think. We need a plan. I'm open to suggestions." She pulled out her notebook, the waterproof one she used for field work. Started making notes, sketching diagrams. I recognized it as her coping mechanism. When the world stopped making sense, June retreated into data and analysis. "Facts," she said, writing as she spoke. 1. All our navigation equipment is malfunctioning. 2. We appear to be trapped in a limited geographic area, even though GPS says otherwise. 3. There are hostile entities searching for us. 4. Time is wrong. Stars are wrong. Geography is wrong. That's a lot of wrong. I said. Which means there must be a pattern, something connecting all these wrongnesses. And if there isn't... June looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Then, we're going to die up here. We spent the rest of the day trying to figure out the pattern. June approached it like a scientific problem, because that was all she knew how to do. She mapped the locations where we'd seen the glowing figures. She documented every equipment malfunction. She timed how fast the sun moved across the sky and compared it to what it should be doing. The sun was wrong. It moved too fast, racing from east to west in what felt like hours instead of a full day. And yet my watch, my old mechanical watch that didn't rely on batteries or satellites, said only 4 hours had passed since dawn. Either time was moving at different rates for us and the sun, or the sun wasn't real. I didn't suggest that to June. She was barely holding on as it was. Around what should have been afternoon, I went to refill our water bottles from the lake. We were running low, and despite everything, we still needed to drink. I knelt at the shore, looking at my reflection in that dark green water. It stared back at me, and this time I was certain it wasn't quite right. The eyes were slightly too far apart. The nose was a little too long, like someone had tried to copy my face from memory and gotten it almost perfect. Almost. As I watched, my reflection smiled. I wasn't smiling. I jerked back from the water, heart hammering. The reflection didn't follow. It just kept smiling at me, that too wide smile, before it slowly faded back into normalcy. I didn't fill the water bottles. I went back to June and told her we needed to ration what we had. "For how long?" she asked. "I don't know. As long as we can." The sun raced toward the western peaks. We had maybe an hour of daylight left, if my watch was to be believed. We needed to decide. Camp here by the lake, or try to find somewhere else before dark. "I don't want to stay here," June said, looking at the water. "This place, it's the center of everything. All the wrongness radiates from here. You think if we get far enough away, things will go back to normal? I think we have to try." So we walked. We climbed up out of the basin, heading for a ridgeline to the south. It should have been a 30-minute hike. It took us 3 hours, and when we reached the ridge, we looked down and saw the lake below us. We'd climbed for 3 hours and ended up maybe 200 yards from where we started. June sat down on a rock and didn't say anything, just stared at the lake with an expression I couldn't read. "We're stuck here," she finally said. "Aren't we? Whatever this place is, we can't leave it. There has to be a way. Does there? What if there isn't? What if we just stay here forever, walking in circles, while those things hunt us? June, my parents are going to wonder what happened to me. They'll organize a search. Sayar will come up here looking for us, and they'll find what? Nothing? Our bodies? Or will they get stuck here too? We're not dead yet." "Yet," she repeated. That's the key word. Night was coming fast. We could see it creeping across the basin below us, shadow swallowing shadow, until everything disappeared into darkness. "We need to set up camp," I said. June nodded mechanically. We erected our tents on the ridgeline, working by headlamp. The wind was worse up here, howling across the exposed rock, but at least we could see in all directions. We'd have warning if anything approached. We ate a cold dinner, granola bars and cheese, saving our fuel for when we really needed it. Neither of us spoke. What was there to say? Every hypothesis we'd made, every plan we'd tried had failed. We were trapped in a place that didn't follow normal rules, being hunted by things that wore human voices like clothes. As darkness fell, the glowing figures appeared again, more of them this time, maybe 50 or 60 scattered across the slopes, They moved in those same methodical search patterns, calling out in voices borrowed from the lost and missing. I recognized some of them now. Not just Marcus Drummond, but names from old case files. Hikers who'd disappeared in these mountains over the past decade. All of them supposedly found eventually, extracted by helicopter, diagnosed with altitude sickness or exposure. But what if they hadn't really been found? What if what came back was something else, something wearing their faces and voices? "Ethan?" June's voice was quiet. "Look at your watch." I checked it. According to the mechanical movement, it was 8:47 p.m. We'd set up camp at what my watch said was 7:30, but the stars were out. All of them, the same wrong constellations we'd seen the night before, but much brighter now. So bright they cast shadows. And the moon, there shouldn't have been a moon tonight. I knew that for certain. We'd checked the lunar phase before leaving. New moon. But there it was, rising over the eastern peaks, huge and bloated and the wrong color. Not white or silver, but a sickly yellow-green. "That's not our moon," June whispered. She was right. The Maria were wrong, the patterns on its surface nothing like what they should be. This was a moon from somewhere else, some other sky. "Where are we?" June asked. "Where the hell are we?" I didn't answer because I didn't have an answer. We were in the Wind River Range, but also not. We were at Crystal Lake, but also not. We were in the same universe we'd always been in, but also not. The wrongness was complete now. Sky, stars, moon, sun, time, space, all of it corrupted, all of it transformed into something else. The glowing figures drew closer as the night deepened. They'd found our camp on the ridgeline, and they were converging. "Into the tents," I said. "Stay quiet. Don't respond no matter what they say." We retreated to our separate tents. I zipped mine shut and lay in my sleeping bag listening to the wind and the voices. They arrived within the hour. I could see their glow through the tent fabric, that eerie inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. They surrounded both tents, dozens of them, close enough that I could hear them breathing. Except they weren't breathing. The sound was wrong. Too regular, too mechanical. Like a recording of breathing played on loop. "Hello?" Marcus's voice called out. "I know you're in there. Please. I just want to go home. Can you help me go home?" I stayed silent. "Please," a woman's voice now. "My children are waiting for me. I need to get back to them. Just tell me which way to go." Silence. "We can help each other," a child's voice. "We're all lost. If we work together—" "Stop it!" June's voice cut through the night. "Stop it! I know you're not real. None of this is real." "No," I thought. "June, don't engage with them." "Oh, we're real," Marcus's voice said, and I could hear the smile in it. "We're as real as you are. Maybe more real. You're the ones who are fading." "What does that mean?" June demanded. "Fading into what?" "Into us," the child's voice said. "Into this place. You feel it already, don't you? The way your thoughts slow down, the way your memories blur. Soon you won't remember who you were before. You'll just be another voice in the dark, calling out for help that never comes." "That's not going to happen," June said, but her voice shook. "It happens to everyone eventually," the woman's voice said. "This is a place of forgetting. You'll forget your names, your faces, your whole lives, and then you'll be free to join us. Won't that be nice? No more fear, no more confusion. Just the eternal search, forever and ever." "Get away from us!" June shouted. The lights pulsed brighter. I could see shadows moving across my tent wall. Too many limbs, wrong angles, shapes that hurt to look at. "We'll be back," Marcus's voice said. We'll be back every night, and eventually you'll let us in. You'll open your tents and invite us inside because the loneliness will be worse than whatever we are. Everyone does in the end. The lights began to retreat. I listened to their voices fade into the distance, calling out their eternal questions to the empty night. When they were gone, I heard June crying in her tent. Quiet sobs that she was trying to muffle. I wanted to go to her to offer comfort, but I didn't dare leave my tent. Some instinct told me that stepping outside right now would be a mistake, that something was waiting in the darkness for exactly that. So I lay there and listened to her cry, and hated myself for not being able to help. Dawn came eventually, though by my watch it had only been 3 hours since sunset. Time had compressed again, or expanded, or just stopped meaning anything at all. June emerged from her tent looking worse than I'd ever seen her. Eyes bloodshot, hands shaking, hair wild. She'd crossed some threshold during the night, passed from fear into something beyond fear. Acceptance, maybe, or resignation. They're going to keep coming, she said, every night, until we break. So we don't break. How? How do we not break when reality itself is broken? I didn't have an answer. We packed up in silence, both of us moving on autopilot. I noticed June wasn't bothering to check her GPS anymore, wasn't consulting her compass or her maps. All the equipment she'd relied on was useless here, and she'd finally accepted it. "What now?" she asked when our packs were ready. I looked around the basin, at the wrong lake, the wrong peaks, the wrong sky. "The footprints," I said. "We haven't really looked at them, not carefully. What's to look at? They're impossible footprints, that's all. But maybe they're not random. Maybe they're a pattern, a message." June stared at me. A message from what? From whatever made them. From this place itself, maybe. It was a desperate theory, grasping at straws. But we didn't have anything else. We descended back to the lake. In daylight, the water was its usual dark green, smooth and still. No glowing figures visible, though I knew they were out there somewhere, waiting for night to fall again. The footprints covered the sandy areas around the shore. Hundreds of them now, maybe thousands. All single prints, left foot and right foot mixed together randomly, or maybe not randomly. I knelt next to the nearest print, studying it. Then I looked at the next one, and the next, trying to see a pattern. June joined me, her scientific training kicking in despite everything. She pulled out her notebook, started sketching the locations and orientations of each print. "They're all facing different directions," she observed. "No consistent orientation. What about the spacing? Is there a pattern in how far apart they are?" We spent hours mapping them, measuring distances, looking for anything that might be meaningful. The sun raced across the sky. It had to be afternoon now, though my watch insisted only an hour had passed. And then June found it. "Ethan, look at this." She'd drawn a rough map of all the footprints. Individually, they seemed random, but taken together they formed something. A spiral, a slow spiral that started at the water's edge and curved outward toward the basin rim. "It's a path," June whispered. "The footprints are showing us a path. To where? Only one way to find out." We started following the spiral. It led us around the lake, then up into the rocks above it. The footprints continued, always single, always impossible, but definitely intentional now that we knew to look for the pattern. The spiral took us higher, into a part of the basin I hadn't explored before. The terrain grew steeper, rockier, and then, wedged between two massive boulders, we found it. A cave. Not a natural cave. The opening was too regular, the edges too smooth. This had been made, carved into the mountain by something with purpose. June and I looked at each other. "Do we go in?" she asked. Every instinct I had screamed no. Caves were dangerous in the backcountry. You could get lost, trapped, injured, and this cave felt wrong. The same wrongness that permeated everything in this place. But what choice did we have? Stay outside and wait for the glowing figures to hunt us again? Keep walking in circles until we went mad? "We go in," I said. June turned on her headlamp. I did the same. Together, we stepped into the darkness. The cave descended steeply, and the walls were covered in markings. Not words, not pictures, but symbols I'd never seen before. They hurt to look at, making my eyes water and my head ache. "Don't look directly at them," June warned. "Keep your light on the floor." We descended for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. The passage twisted and turned, leading us deep into the mountain. The air grew colder, and I realized I could see my breath, even though I could also feel sweat running down my back. Temperature was wrong here, too. Everything was wrong. And then the passage opened up into a chamber. It was huge, the size of a cathedral, our headlamps barely reaching the ceiling. And it was full of light. Not glowing figures this time. This was different. Pure, white light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, filling the space with an illumination that cast no shadows. In the center of the chamber stood a figure, not glowing, not transparent, solid, human, a man in ranger uniform standing with his hands clasped behind his back, looking at us with eyes that held ancient patience. "Welcome," he said. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." His voice was normal, no echo, no distortion. Just a man's voice, middle-aged, slightly tired. "Who are you?" June demanded. "William Ashford," he said, though I haven't used that name in a very long time. I stared at him. Bill Ashford, our district ranger, the man who'd sent us up here, but this wasn't Bill. It couldn't be. Bill was in his 50s, gray hair, weathered face. This man looked 30 at most, his face smooth and unlined. "You're not Bill Ashford," I said. "I was," he replied. "Once, before I understood what this place really is." "And what is it?" June asked. The man, William, smiled. "A thin place. The old Celts had a term for it. Places where the barrier between worlds grows gossamer thin, where reality bleeds through from one side to another." "That's not real," June said. "Thin places are mythology." "Is it? Then where are you right now, June Hartley? In the Wind River Range? Or somewhere else? Both? Neither?" He knew our names. Of course he did. "Why are we here?" I asked. "Because you came looking for answers. Because Marcus Drummond came looking for answers. Because everyone who finds this place comes looking for something, and the mountain provides." William gestured around the chamber. "This is the heart of it. The source, everything radiates from here." "The footprints," June said. "Were they yours?" "Mine? No. They belong to everyone who's ever been here. Every visitor, every lost hiker, every searcher. This place takes impressions, memories. It holds them, preserves them. The footprints are all of us scattered across time." "And the glowing things?" I asked. "The ones that wear people's voices." William's expression grew sad. "Those are the ones who stayed too long, who let the wrongness seep into them until they became part of it. They're not malicious exactly. They're just lonely. They want company. They want someone to join them in the eternal search for a way home." "Is there a way home?" June whispered. "Yes," William said. "There's always a way home. But you have to understand something first. You have to understand what this place is showing you, which is that reality is not fixed. That the world you know, your world of GPS coordinates and compass bearings and natural laws, is only one version, one possibility. This place exists in the gaps between possibilities. It's neither real nor unreal. It simply is. June was shaking her head. That's impossible. Physics doesn't work that way. Doesn't it? William smiled again. You've seen time move wrong. You've seen stars that don't exist in your sky. You've walked east and arrived where you started. At what point do you accept that your physics might not be the only physics? I thought about my reflection in the lake, about the footprints that existed without a walker, about nights that lasted 3 hours, and days that felt like minutes. How do we get out? I asked. How do we go home? The same way you came in, William said. Through the thin place, but you have to find it first. The lake, June said suddenly. The water. That's the thin place, isn't it? William nodded. The water is the membrane, the boundary. You came through it without realizing. That first day when you saw your reflection move wrong. You've been on the other side ever since. So we just go back through the water? I asked. If you can, William said. If you still remember which side is which. If your minds haven't been too changed by being here. Some people forget which reality they came from. They get lost in the in-between and never find their way back. June and I looked at each other. Could we still remember? Everything felt dreamlike now, memories blurred at the edges. Had we been here days? Weeks? My watch said 4 days, but my watch had been wrong about everything else. Go, William said. Before you forget any more, the water is the way. Trust your reflection. It knows which way is home. What about you? I asked. Are you coming? William shook his head. I'm staying. Someone has to stay, to guide the others who come looking. Someone has to keep the light burning in the in-between. You're choosing to stay here? Forever? Is it really a choice if you've forgotten what the alternative was? He smiled, sad and strange. Go home, Ethan Cole. Go home, June Hartley. And when people ask you what happened up here, tell them you got disoriented. Tell them the altitude affected you. Don't tell them about the thin places. Don't send anyone else looking. We backed away, out of the chamber, into the passage. The symbols on the walls seemed less painful now, or maybe my eyes had adjusted. We climbed back up through the darkness, toward the entrance. The sun was setting when we emerged. Impossible. It had been afternoon minutes ago, but nothing surprised me anymore. We ran down to the lake. The water was dark green, smooth as glass. Our reflections stared back at us, and I could see it now. The subtle wrongness, the not quite rightness that marked them as other. What do we do? June asked. We go in, I said. We trust William. We trust our reflections to guide us home. And if he was lying, if this is a trap, then we die in the water instead of out here. At least it'll be faster. June laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. Then she grabbed my hand. Together, she said, together. We walked into the water. It was cold, impossibly cold. Colder than mountain water should ever be. The cold burned, then numbed, then became something else entirely. A feeling like falling and flying at the same time. My reflection reached up toward me from below. I reached down toward it. Our hands met, and the world inverted. Epilogue. 600 words. We woke up on the shore of Crystal Lake, the real Crystal Lake. Water the color of sky, rimmed with granite boulders that looked like boulders instead of geometric patterns. My watch said 4 days had passed. My body agreed. I was dehydrated, hungry, exhausted. June was in the same condition, both of us lying on the sand like we'd been washed up by a tide. But we were home. The rescue helicopter found us 6 hours later. Bill Ashford, the real Bill, 53 years old, gray hair, weathered face, met us at the hospital in Lander. "What happened up there?" he asked. I looked at June. We'd agreed on the story during the helicopter ride. Altitude sickness, disorientation, equipment failures. A frightening experience, but nothing inexplicable. "Got turned around," I said. "Equipment malfunctioned. We got dehydrated, started seeing things. Classic high-altitude confusion." Bill nodded, satisfied. "Happens more than people think. The mountains play tricks at that elevation." He had no idea. Or maybe he did. Maybe the younger William was still up there, in the Chamber of Light, guiding lost souls through the in-between. June quit the next week. Took a job with the Forest Service in Oregon, low-elevation work, nothing above 5,000 feet. She sent me a letter months later, just one line. "I still see wrong reflections sometimes. Do you?" I did. Still do. But I don't go looking for them anymore. I still work as a ranger in the Wind Rivers. Someone has to. And when hikers activate emergency beacons near Crystal Lake, I'm the one who goes up to get them. They all tell the same story. The wrong lake, the spinning compass, the voices in the dark. I tell them they're lucky. They found their way back. Not everyone does. And sometimes, when I'm up there alone, I see a figure standing at the water's edge. Young, wearing a ranger uniform, watching me with patient ancient eyes. I never approach. I just nod, and the figure nods back, and we both understand. The thin places are still there. They'll always be there, and someone has to keep watch. My name is Silas Brennan, and I need to tell you about the summer I learned that sound doesn't always travel the way it should. I'd been working as a backcountry ranger in the Bridger-Teton National Forest for 7 years. 7 years of dealing with bear encounters, lost hikers, and the occasional idiot who thought bringing a drone into wilderness was a good idea. I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. It started with Markel Hayes. He was the new guy, transferred in from the Tetons in early June. Young, maybe 26, eager in that way that made me tired just watching him. He'd grown up in Jackson, spent his whole life in the mountains, and carried himself like someone who had something to prove. "I want the hard assignments," he told me on his first day. "The long patrols, the high country. I didn't become a ranger to babysit tourists at trailheads." I liked him despite myself. Reminded me of who I'd been before the mountains taught me humility. "Hard assignments, you got it," I said. "How do you feel about 10 days in the Granite Peak Wilderness? A solo patrol, check on the backcountry sites, document trail conditions." Markel's eyes lit up. "When do I leave?" "Give it a week. Get acclimated. Learn our systems. Then you can head out." He nodded, impatient but willing to wait. I watched him study our maps that afternoon, tracing routes with his finger, planning his patrol like a general planning a campaign. That's when I should have seen it. The overconfidence. The assumption that mountains were just obstacles to be overcome with enough preparation and skill. But I didn't see it. Or I saw it and didn't care. Either way, I sent him out a week later with 10 days of supplies and a satellite phone for emergencies. "Check in every evening," I told him. 7 p.m. regular as clockwork. Miss one check-in, I'm sending search and rescue. "I won't miss one," Markel promised. He didn't either. For the first 4 days he called right on schedule. His reports were professional, detailed. Trail conditions good, snowmelt progressing normally, no issues with hikers or wildlife. He sounded happy, energized by the solitude and the work. On the 5th day, something in his voice changed. "Silas?" "Yeah, it's Markel, just checking in." "You okay?" "You sound off." A pause. Yeah, I'm fine. Just had a weird thing happen today, probably nothing." "Tell me anyway." Another pause, longer this time. "I was hiking up toward Dinwoody Creek. Rocky terrain, lots of cliffs and couloirs. I called out, just yelling to hear the echo. Something I do sometimes. And the echo came back from behind me. I waited for more, but that was it. Come again." I was facing north, yelling toward the cliffs. The echo should have bounced back from the north, but it came from the south, from behind me. Like the sound had traveled backward somehow. "Weird acoustics," I said. "Happens in canyon country. Sound bounces off multiple surfaces, comes at you from unexpected angles." "That's what I figured. But Silas, there weren't any cliffs behind me, just open valley. Nothing for the sound to bounce off." Something about the way he said it made the hair on my neck stand up, but I kept my voice casual. "Altitude can mess with perception. Are you drinking enough water? Any headache, nausea?" "No, nothing like that. I feel fine. It was just strange." "You want to come back early?" "Hell no." The old confidence returned to his voice. "I'm not bailing because of a weird echo. I'll see you in 5 days." He hung up before I could argue. That night, I pulled out the topographic maps of the Granite Peak Wilderness, traced Markel's route with my finger. The area around Dinwoody Creek was remote, high-altitude country. Lots of granite formations, glacial valleys, places where sound could do funny things, but nothing that would make an echo come from the opposite direction. I told myself Markel was right. Altitude playing tricks, acoustic anomalies, nothing to worry about. But I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about that echo, traveling backward, defying physics. The next evening, Markel's check-in came late. Not by much, maybe 10 minutes, but enough to make me nervous. When the phone finally rang, he sounded breathless. Sorry. Lost track of time." "What happened?" "Nothing happened. I was at my campsite and I could have sworn I heard voices. Spent 20 minutes trying to find who it was before I realized it was just me." "What do you mean, just you?" "I was talking to myself while I set up my tent. Normal stuff, just thinking out loud. But then I'd hear the words again, like someone was repeating them back to me, delayed by a few seconds. An echo. Yeah, but Silas, I was in a meadow, wide open space. Nothing to echo off of. Maybe other hikers nearby? No, I checked. There's no one up here but me." This time, I didn't have an easy explanation. "You're sure you feel okay? No symptoms of altitude sickness?" "I'm sure. I've been higher than this plenty of times. I know what haze feels like." "Then, what's your theory?" A long silence, then, "I don't have one. That's what's bothering me." "Come back," I said. "Cut the patrol short. We'll send someone else to finish it." "No way. I've got 5 more days of sights to check. I'm not quitting because of some weird sounds." "Markel, I'll call you tomorrow, same time. I promise I'm fine." He hung up again. I sat in my office at the ranger station, staring at the maps, wondering if I should override his decision and call him back anyway. But on what grounds? He hadn't broken any protocols. He wasn't showing signs of altitude sickness. He'd just experienced some acoustic anomalies. Rangers dealt with weird stuff all the time. The mountains were full of optical illusions, acoustic tricks, phenomena that seemed impossible until you understood the science behind them. But my instincts were screaming that this was different. I called our district supervisor, Carol Whitmore. She'd been with the Forest Service for 30 years, knew these mountains better than anyone. Carol, you ever heard of echoes coming from the wrong direction? What do you mean, wrong direction? I explained what Markel had told me. Carol was quiet for a long moment. There are places up high where the acoustics get strange, she finally said. Temperature inversions can bend sound waves, make them travel in unexpected ways. I've heard of people swearing they heard voices coming from empty valleys, or sounds seeming to originate from multiple directions at once. But from the opposite direction. Sound traveling backward? No, I haven't heard of that specifically. Which ranger reported this? Markel Hayes. He's on a 10-day solo patrol in the Granite Wilderness. The new guy? How's he handling the altitude? Says he's fine. No symptoms. Then he's probably fine. New rangers sometimes psych themselves out up there. The isolation gets to them. They start noticing every little weird thing. Tell him to hydrate, take it easy, and call if he develops any actual symptoms. And if the weird sounds continue? Carol sighed. Then we have a decision to make. But let's not borrow trouble. Wait for his next check-in. We hung up, and I tried to take her advice. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The 7th day came and went. Markel called right on time, sounded normal. No mention of weird echoes or phantom voices. He checked 3 more backcountry sites, documented everything properly, was right on schedule. "See," he said when I asked how he was doing. "Told you I was fine. Whatever that weirdness was, it's past." "Good. 3 more days and you're back." "Can't wait. I've been dreaming about burgers and beer for the past week." He sounded like himself again, confident, cheerful, in control. I felt foolish for worrying. That was the last normal conversation we had. Day 8, Markel didn't call. 7 p.m. came and went. I waited 15 minutes, then 30, then an hour. Nothing. At 8:30, I tried calling him. The satellite phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. "Markel, it's Silas. You missed check-in. Call me back as soon as you get this." I waited another hour. Nothing. At 10 p.m., I called Carol. "We've got a problem." By 11 p.m., we'd activated search and rescue. The plan was to wait until first light, then send a helicopter to Markel's last known location, a campsite near Mammoth Glacier. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office, drinking coffee, staring at maps, running through every possible scenario. Equipment failure, injury, animal attack, a fall, or something else. Something to do with echoes that came from the wrong direction. The helicopter left at dawn. I went with them, along with 2 SAR techs and Carol. We flew over some of the most remote country in Wyoming. High alpine basins, glacial valleys, peaks that looked like they'd never been climbed. Beautiful and deadly. We reached Markel's last known coordinates just after 7 a.m. The pilot circled while we scanned the ground. "There," Carol pointed. "Campsite." We saw it. A tent, properly staked, no visible damage. A cold fire ring. Gear organized neatly near the tent entrance. But no Markel. The pilot found a flat spot to land, maybe a quarter-mile from the campsite. We hiked in, Carol and I in the lead, the SAR techs following. The campsite looked wrong from the moment we arrived. I can't explain why. Everything was in place. Tent, sleeping bag, backpack, food bag hung properly from a tree. Nothing disturbed, nothing missing. But the whole scene felt staged, like a photograph instead of a real campsite. "Markel," I called out. My voice echoed off the rocks to the north. Normal echo, coming from the right direction. Then, 3 seconds later, I heard my own voice again, coming from the south. Markel! The same word, the same inflection, but arriving from behind me. Carol heard it too. I saw her face go pale. What the hell was that? One of the SAR techs asked. An echo, I said, but my voice shook. Because it wasn't an echo. Echoes don't come from empty space. They don't arrive after a 3-second delay from the opposite direction. Carol knelt by the fire ring, touched the ashes. Still warm, she said quietly. How warm? Like it was put out an hour ago, maybe less. But that was impossible. Markel had missed his check-in last night, more than 12 hours ago. If he'd been here recently enough for the fire to still be warm, where had he been all night? I looked around the campsite more carefully. The tent door was zipped shut. The food bag hung undisturbed. Markel's boots sat neatly beside his pack. His boots are here, I said. Carol stood up. He wouldn't have gone hiking without boots. No, he wouldn't. We searched the area around the campsite. The ground was rocky, difficult to read, but we found some prints. Bare feet, human-sized. The prints led away from the camp, heading north toward the ridgeline. Markel, I called again. The echo came back from the north, then 3 seconds later from the south. We need to follow those prints, Carol said. We did. The SAR techs stayed at the campsite to coordinate with the helicopter while Carol and I tracked the barefoot prints up the slope. They were clear at first, pressed into patches of soft soil between the rocks. But as we climbed higher, the ground got harder, the prints harder to follow. After 20 minutes, we reached a cliff face. The prints stopped at the base of the cliff. Just stopped. No sign they'd turned aside, no indication the person had climbed up or doubled back. The prints walked right up to the granite wall and vanished. This doesn't make sense, Carol said. I looked up at the cliff. Sheer granite, maybe 60 feet high, unclimbable without gear. Markel! I shouted at the cliff face. The echo bounced back immediately, then 3 seconds later from behind us. Silas, Carol said quietly. We need to call this in. Get more people up here. Something's very wrong. She was right. This had gone beyond a simple missing person case. This was something else. Something I didn't have words for. We hiked back to the campsite. The SAR techs had searched the immediate area, found nothing. No sign of a struggle, no blood, no torn clothing, nothing to indicate what had happened to Markel. I went into his tent. Everything was organized with military precision. Sleeping bag folded, clothes packed away, journal lying open on his sleeping pad. I picked up the journal. The last entry was from the previous evening. Day 7, camped near Mammoth Glacier. Beautiful sight, clear weather. Had another incident with the echoes today. This time it was worse. I was calling out to test it, and the delayed echo, the one that comes from behind, it didn't sound quite like my voice anymore. Close, but not exact. Like someone was imitating me, getting the tone almost right, but missing something essential. I know it's just acoustics, temperature inversions, sound refraction, something scientific, but it's starting to unnerve me. When I set up camp tonight, I kept hearing noises just outside the tent. Footsteps, maybe, or wind. Hard to tell. Going to try to get some sleep. Only 3 more days. I can handle 3 more days. The entry stopped there. Nothing after that. I showed the journal to Carol. She read it, her expression grim. We're pulling everyone off the mountain, she said. I want a full SAR team up here by tomorrow morning. We're going to grid search this entire area until we find him. What about the echo thing? Should we mention it in the report? Carol looked at me. You want to tell them that sound is traveling backward? That we found warm ashes from a fire that should be cold? that barefoot prints led to a cliff and disappeared? It's what happened. It's what we experienced. But unless we can explain it, it's going to sound like we're the ones suffering from altitude sickness. She was right, but it felt wrong to leave it out. We flew back to the ranger station. By afternoon, a full search and rescue operation was underway. 20 trained volunteers, 3 helicopters, search dogs. They combed the area around Markel's campsite for 2 days. They found nothing. No body, no gear, no trace. It was like Markel Hayes had simply ceased to exist at his campsite near Mammoth Glacier. On the 3rd day, they called off the search. Presumed dead due to misadventure in remote wilderness. That was the official determination. I couldn't accept it. That night, I sat in my office and made a decision. I was going back up there, not as part of an official search, but on my own. I needed to understand what had happened, and I needed to know why echoes were coming from the wrong direction. I gave myself 3 days to prepare. Studied the maps, checked and rechecked my gear, made sure my satellite phone was fully charged. I told Carol I was taking some personal time, going to clear my head after the failed search for Markel. She didn't believe me, but she didn't stop me either. "Be careful," was all she said. I left before dawn, driving to the trailhead at Green River Lakes, the same trailhead Markel had used. From there, it was a 20-mile hike to Mammoth Glacier, gaining over 4,000 feet of elevation. I'd done this hike dozens of times. I knew every switchback, every water crossing, every campsite along the way. The mountains were supposed to be familiar territory. But from the moment I started hiking, something felt off. The trail was empty, not unusual for a weekday in late June, but the emptiness felt wrong. Too quiet, like the forest was holding its breath. I made good time, reaching my first campsite at Clear Creek by early afternoon. Set up my tent, filtered water, ate an early dinner. Everything normal, everything by the book. As the sun set, I sat by my fire and listened to the creek. The sound of running water was supposed to be soothing. Instead, it sounded discordant, like the timing was slightly off, the rhythm not quite right. I tried calling out, testing the echo. "Hello!" The sound bounced off the trees, came back to me from the right direction. Normal, but 5 seconds later I heard it again, quieter, coming from upstream. "Hello?" Same word, same inflection, but delayed, and from the wrong direction. I felt my pulse quicken. This was it, what Markel had experienced, the echo that defied physics. I tried again. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Normal echo, immediate from the trees. Then the delayed echo 5 seconds later from upstream. Testing, 1, 2, 3. But something was wrong with it. The voice was almost mine, but not quite. Like someone had recorded me and played it back at slightly the wrong speed. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept hearing sounds outside my tent. Footsteps, whispers, the crunch of gravel under feet. But every time I looked out, there was nothing there. At dawn, I packed up and continued hiking. Another 10 miles to Mammoth Glacier. The trail climbed steadily, switchbacking up into alpine country, where the trees gave way to rock and snow. Around noon, I stopped for water at a small tarn. The surface was perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a mirror. I knelt to fill my bottles and saw my reflection. It moved half a second after I did. I froze, watching. I lifted my hand. My reflection lifted its hand half a second later. I blinked. My reflection blinked half a second later. Like there was a delay, a lag between me and my image. I stumbled back from the water's edge, heart pounding. This was impossible. Reflections don't have delays. Light travels too fast for human perception to notice any gap. But I'd seen it. the half-second lag between my movement and my reflection's movement. I didn't fill my water bottles from that tarn. I found a stream half a mile up the trail, filtered water there instead, refusing to look at my reflection in the moving current. By late afternoon, I reached Markel's campsite. It looked exactly as we'd left it 3 days ago. The SAR team had taken his tent and gear as evidence, but the fire ring was still there, cold now. The spot where his tent had stood was a rectangle of flattened grass, and his barefoot prints were still visible, leading away toward the cliff. I followed them, even though I knew where they led, even though I knew they stopped at the granite wall. Sure enough, the prints ended at the cliff face, but this time I looked more carefully. The last print, the right foot, was perfectly clear. Toes, arch, heel, all distinct. And it was pressed deep into the soil like the person had been running toward a cliff wall. I looked up at the granite. Unclimbable. No handholds, no cracks, nothing but smooth stone. "Markel!" I called out. The normal echo came back immediately. Then, 5 seconds later, the delayed echo from behind me. "Markel!" But the voice was wrong. Still mine, but slightly off in pitch. Like it was coming from someone with a throat almost exactly like mine, but not quite. I tried something different. "Where are you?" Normal echo. Then the delayed one. "Where are you?" But the delayed voice put the emphasis on different words. "Where are you?" instead of "Where are you?" Like it was a question, not an echo. "Who are you?" I called out. Normal echo. No delayed echo. Silence. Then, after 10 seconds, a voice from behind me. My voice, but wrong. "Who are you?" I spun around. Nothing there. Just empty alpine meadow, granite boulders, the distant peaks. "Show yourself," I shouted. "Hush." This time, no normal echo. Just the delayed one, 10 seconds later, from behind me. "Show yourself." Not a question. Not an answer. Just repetition. The sun was getting low. I needed to set up camp before dark. Against every instinct, I decided to camp at Markel's old site. I wanted to experience whatever he'd experienced. I needed to understand. I set up my tent where his had been, built a fire in the same ring he'd used. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, I sat by the fire and waited. The stars came out. More stars than you ever see at low elevation, so many they cast shadows. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light, beautiful and terrifying. Around 9 p.m. I heard it. Footsteps, bare feet on stone, moving around the perimeter of my camp. Slow, deliberate steps, circling. I grabbed my flashlight, swept the beam across the darkness. Nothing. But the footsteps continued unaffected by the light. "Markel, is that you?" No answer, just the footsteps, circling, circling. "If you're out there, show yourself. I came to find you." The footsteps stopped. Complete silence, so absolute it hurt my ears. Then a voice, my voice, coming from the darkness beyond my fire. "I came to find you." Same words, same inflection, but not quite right, like a recording played back at the wrong speed. "Where's Markel?" I asked. Silence. Then, in my voice, "Where's Markel?" "Stop repeating me. Stop repeating me." This wasn't an echo. Echoes don't carry on conversations. Echoes don't pause for 10 seconds before responding. This was something else. I added wood to my fire, building it up until flames reached 4 feet high. The light pushed back the darkness, created a circle of safety around my tent. But beyond that circle, I could see them now. Shadows that moved wrong. Shapes that were almost human but not quite, and all of them were watching me. I stayed by the fire all night. Every time I thought about sleeping, I'd hear the footsteps again, circling just outside the firelight. And sometimes I'd hear my own voice coming from the darkness, saying things I hadn't said yet. I'm scared. I was scared, but I hadn't said it out loud. I want to go home. I did want to go home, but I hadn't said that either. Something's wrong with the mountains. Yes, something was wrong. But how did my voice know what I was thinking? Dawn came slowly. The shadows retreated as the sky lightened. By the time the sun crested the peaks, I was alone again. No footsteps, no voices, no shapes in the darkness. Just me and the empty alpine basin. I should have left right then. Packed up, hiked out, told Carol that the search for Markel was hopeless because something in these mountains was fundamentally wrong. But I didn't leave. Because as the morning light hit the cliff face where Markel's footprints ended, I saw something I hadn't seen before. A shadow on the rock. A vertical shadow, like a crack or a crevice. But there was no crack. I'd examined that cliff face 3 days ago. It was smooth granite, unbroken. I walked closer. The shadow remained. A dark, vertical line about 6 feet tall and 2 feet wide. But as I got within 10 feet of the cliff, I could see there was no actual crevice. The rock was solid. The shadow had no source. I reached out to touch it. My hand passed through the rock like it wasn't there. No, not through the rock, into somewhere else. I pulled my hand back, stared at it. My fingers were fine, undamaged. But they'd definitely passed through solid granite. Or what appeared to be solid granite. This was where Markel had gone. I was certain of it. The footprints ran right up to this spot, and then he'd stepped through. Into what? I thought about his journal entry. About the voice that sounded almost like him, but not quite. About the footsteps outside his tent. Whatever was on the other side of this impossible opening, it was connected to the echoes. The delayed echoes that came from the wrong direction. I had to know. I stepped through the shadow. The transition was instant and disorienting. One moment I was standing in bright morning sunlight. The next, I was in twilight. I spun around. Behind me, I could see the alpine basin through what looked like a vertical seam in the air. My campsite, my fire, the morning light, all of it visible through this narrow gap. But when I turned back around, I was somewhere else. Same granite cliffs, same general topology, but the light was wrong. Too dim, coming from a sun that hung too low on the horizon. And the sky was the wrong color. Not blue, but a kind of gray-purple. The air tasted different. Thinner, but also thicker somehow, like breathing water vapor. "Hello?" I called out. No echo. My voice just died in the strange air, absorbed by something. I looked around. The landscape was almost identical to the basin I'd just left, but subtly wrong. The peaks were the same height, but slightly different shapes. The rocks were granite, but with striations I didn't recognize. And there were structures. Not buildings, exactly. More like arrangements. Stones stacked in patterns that couldn't be natural. Cairns, maybe, but too large, too deliberate. As I watched, one of the structures moved. Not collapsed, moved. The stones rearranged themselves, flowing like liquid, forming a new pattern. That's when I understood. The stones weren't just stones, they were watching me. "Markel!" I shouted. My voice was absorbed by the dead air. But then, 5 seconds later, I heard an answer. Silas, his voice, Markel's voice, coming from beyond the structures. I ran toward it, scrambling over rocks, ignoring the altitude burn in my lungs. "Markel, where are you?" "Here." His voice closer now. "I'm here." I rounded a boulder and found him. Markel Hayes sat on a rock, staring at his hands. He looked wrong. Too pale, too thin, like he'd been here for months instead of days. Markel. I grabbed his shoulder. Jesus, man, we've been looking everywhere for you. He looked up at me. His eyes were the right color, his face the right shape. But something essential was missing. Silas, he said. You shouldn't have come here. We need to leave, right now. Can you walk? I can't leave. I tried. The opening, it's only one way. What do you mean, one way? Markel pointed back the way I'd come. You can enter, but you can't exit. Watch. He walked toward the seam in the air. The opening I'd come through. I could still see my campsite through it, could still see the morning light. Markel reached out to pass through. His hand hit solid air. He pushed harder. Nothing. The opening was there, but it was like pushing against an invisible wall. See, he said. One way. I've been trying for 3 days. My mind raced. Then how do we get out? I don't know. I've been exploring, looking for another opening, but this place, it's bigger than it looks, or maybe it changes. I've hiked for hours and ended up back where I started. Like me and my delayed reflection. Like the campsite that had a warm fire 12 hours after it should have been cold. What is this place? I asked. Markel shook his head. I don't know. But the echoes, they're not echoes. They're something else. Something that lives here. What do you mean, lives here? Before he could answer, I heard it. My own voice, coming from multiple directions at once. What do you mean, lives here? Not Markel's voice. Mine. Repeated from a dozen different locations. They listen, Markel whispered, and then they repeat. They're learning. The structures of stone began to move again, rearranging themselves, flowing like water, forming new patterns. Patterns that looked almost like human shapes. We need to hide, Markel said. When they get active like this, it's not safe to be out in the open. Hide where? I found a cave. Come on. We ran. Behind us, I could hear stone grinding against stone as the structures moved. And underneath that sound, voices. Dozens of voices, all slightly wrong. All repeating things I'd said. Things I'd thought. I'm scared. I want to go home. Something's wrong with the mountains. My voice, speaking my thoughts, coming from creatures made of stone. Markel's cave was a narrow slot in the cliff face, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Inside, it opened up into a small chamber. Dark, cold, but sheltered. We sat in the darkness, catching our breath. How long have you been here? I asked. 3 days, or maybe longer. Time doesn't work right. Sometimes it feels like hours pass in minutes. Other times, minutes stretch into hours. Your campsite, we found it. The fire was still warm. Markel stared at me. That's impossible. I left that campsite days ago. I know. But the ashes were warm, like it had been put out an hour before we arrived. Then time is even more broken than I thought. He rubbed his face. God, Silas, what is this place? You said the echoes are alive. What did you mean? Markel was quiet for a moment. Then, you know how echoes work, right? Sound waves bouncing off surfaces, traveling back to you. Simple physics. Yeah. But what if the sound doesn't just bounce? What if something catches it, holds it, studies it? You're saying something is collecting our words. Not just our words, our voices. The sound patterns that make us unique. It's learning how to mimic us. I thought about the delayed echoes, always slightly wrong. About my voice saying things I hadn't said yet. Why? I asked. I don't know, but I think it wants to understand what we are. Or maybe it wants to become us. The stone structures, what are those? I'm not sure. They move, they watch, they rearrange themselves into different patterns. Sometimes they look almost human. I think they're trying to copy us. Like the voices, but physical. We sat in silence. Outside the cave, I could hear stone grinding against stone. The structures were moving, searching. We can't stay here forever, I said. I know, but I don't know how to get out. I've tried everything. I've followed the cliff line for miles, looking for another opening. I've climbed to the ridges, hoping to find a way back, but every path leads back to the same place. What about the opening I came through? You said you can't exit through it, but maybe there's a trick. Maybe. I've tried everything. It's solid, one way only. Then there must be another way out, another opening. If there is, I haven't found it. I pulled out my flashlight, turned it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the cave walls. They were covered in markings. Scratches, symbols, patterns carved into the stone. Did you do this? I asked. Markel shook his head. They were already here. I think other people have been trapped here before. I examined the markings more closely. Some were crude, clearly made by fingernails or rocks. Others were more elaborate, carved with tools. And they told a story of people entering this place and never leaving. How many? I whispered. I've counted at least 30 different sets of markings. Could be more. The cave goes deeper than I've explored. 30 people, over how many years, how many decades? All trapped here, all trying to find a way out. Did any of them make it? I asked. I don't know. Some of the markings just stop. Mid-word, mid-sentence, like the person disappeared while carving. Or gave up, or died, or something worse. I thought about my satellite phone. I pulled it out, checked the screen. No signal, of course. But I tried anyway, keying in Carol's number. The phone made a sound. Not a ring, but a strange warbling tone. And then I heard Carol's voice. Silas? Silas, where are you? Carol, thank God. Listen, I'm trapped. Markel's here too. We're in some kind of... Silas, where are you? The same words, exactly the same, like a recording. Carol, can you hear me? Silas, where are you? The same loop over and over. Not a real conversation, just Carol's voice captured somehow, played back. I hung up, stared at the phone. It does that, Markel said. The phone, I tried too. It only plays back voices, never makes a real connection. Like something's intercepting the signal, copying it, sending it back. The stone structures, maybe, or whatever controls them. We needed a plan. Sitting in a cave wasn't going to save us. Okay, I said. Let's think this through. We came in through an opening. There has to be a way out. Maybe not the same opening, but another one. I've looked. Then we look again, together, systematically. We map this place, grid by grid, until we find something. Markel nodded slowly. Okay, but we need to be careful. When the stone structures get active, they're dangerous. Dangerous how? They try to touch you, and when they do... He rolled up his sleeve, showed me his arm. The skin was discolored, mottled, with a texture that looked almost like granite. Jesus, does it hurt? Not anymore. At first it burned, but now it's just numb. It's spreading slowly. Another few days and... He didn't finish the sentence. We waited until the sounds outside the cave stopped, until the stone grinding ceased and silence returned. Then we emerged into the twilight. The structures had moved during our time in the cave. They were arranged differently now, forming a rough circle around the cave entrance, like they'd been waiting for us. Yes. Don't touch them, Markel warned. and don't let them touch you. We moved carefully through the stone formations. They didn't move as we passed, but I could feel them watching. Awareness radiating from arrangements of granite that shouldn't be alive. We climbed to higher ground, trying to get a vantage point. From a ridge, we could see the entire basin spread out below us. It was bigger than it should be. The basin I'd hiked into was maybe 2 miles across. This one looked like 10 miles. Impossibly large, extending far beyond where the mountains should have ended. And there were more structures, hundreds of them, scattered across the landscape. Some small, some massive. All of them moving slowly, rearranging themselves in patterns I couldn't understand. There, Markel pointed. See that? The darker area near the far cliff? I looked. There was something different about that section. The twilight seemed thicker there, the air more solid. Could be another opening, I said. That's what I thought, but it's at least 3 miles away, through all of that. He gestured at the structures below. Then we move carefully, at night when they're less active. Night is worse, Markel said. Trust me, you don't want to be out there at night. Worse how? Before he could answer, the twilight began to deepen. The gray-purple sky darkened to black. The transition was too fast, like someone had turned off a light switch. We need to get back to the cave, Markel said urgently. Now. We ran. Behind us, the stone structures began to move with purpose now. No longer slow rearrangement, but deliberate motion, flowing like water or like muscles under skin. And they were following us. We made it to the cave entrance just as full darkness fell. Inside, we pressed back against the walls, breathing hard. Outside, the grinding of stone on stone grew louder. The structures were gathering at the entrance, filling the opening with their mass. Then the voices started. My voice, Markel's voice, Carol's voice. Dozens of voices, all slightly wrong, all saying things we'd said or thought or whispered. We're going to die here. There's no way out. I should never have come. Help me. Someone help me. I can't breathe in here. The voices overlapped, creating a cacophony of despair. Our own words, our own fears, thrown back at us by things that lived in stone. Markel covered his ears. Don't listen. They're trying to break us down. If we lose hope, we'll give up. And if we give up, what happens? We become like them, part of this place. Another voice echoing forever. The long night passed slowly. The voices never stopped, never tired. They spoke in our voices, saying every fear and doubt we'd ever had. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw stone structures flowing into human shapes. Every time I drifted off, I heard my own voice calling from the darkness. Markel slept fitfully, muttering in his sleep. Once, he cried out and I saw the discoloration on his arm glowing faintly in the darkness. He was changing. Slowly, but inevitably. This place was transforming him into something else. How long did we have before the same thing happened to me? Dawn came suddenly, like the previous night. The darkness lifted all at once, replaced by the gray-purple twilight. The voices stopped. The stone structures outside the cave moved away, resuming their positions across the basin. We emerged from the cave, exhausted and desperate. We're going for the dark area, I said. Today, no matter what happens. Markel nodded. Okay, but we need supplies, water at least. There was a stream nearby, or what passed for a stream in this place. The water ran uphill in places, defying gravity, but it was cold and clear, and we filled our bottles. I tried not to look at my reflection in the water, but I couldn't help it. My reflection moved half a second behind me, just like before, but now there was something else. a subtle wrongness in the face looking back at me. The eyes too far apart, the mouth too wide. This place was changing me too. We started across the basin, moving from cover to cover, avoiding the stone structures. They didn't pursue us, but they watched. I could feel their attention like weight on my shoulders. The journey took hours. The landscape shifted as we moved, distances refusing to remain constant. A landmark that looked a mile away would still be a mile away after an hour of walking. But we kept moving, driven by desperation. Finally, as the light began to dim again, we reached the dark area. It was another opening, or something like one. A section of air that was thicker, darker, more solid than the rest. Looking at it hurt my eyes, like staring at an optical illusion. Markel reached out tentatively. His hand passed through. "It's not solid," he said. "We can go through. Where does it lead?" "I don't know, but anywhere is better than here." He was right. We were running out of time. Another night in this place might be the night we broke. The night we became part of the endless echoes. "Together," I said. "On 3, 1, 2. Before I reached 3, something grabbed my ankle. I looked down. A stone structure had flowed across the ground, wrapping around my leg. The touch burned cold, and I felt the numbness spreading. "Silas!" Markel grabbed my arm, tried to pull me free. But more structures were coming, flowing toward us like a tide. "Go!" I shouted. "Get through the opening." "Not without you." The structures were on me now, wrapping around my legs, my waist. The cold spread, the numbness turning to granite-like rigidity. I was becoming stone. With the last of my strength, I grabbed Markel and threw him toward the opening. He stumbled through and disappeared. I tried to follow, but the structures held me fast. I could feel myself changing, my skin hardening, my thoughts slowing. And then I heard it. My own voice, speaking from a dozen different directions. "Don't leave me here. I want to go home. Somebody help me." The stone structures arranged themselves around me, flowing into new patterns. And as the twilight deepened into night, I realized they were forming a shape. They were forming me. A perfect copy, made of stone, speaking with my voice. The last thing I saw before the stone claimed me completely was the opening. Still there, still dark, tantalizingly close. And on the other side, I could hear Markel screaming my name. But I couldn't answer. Because my mouth was stone, my throat was stone, my lungs were stone. I was stone. And then I was nothing. Epilogue, 750 words. Markel Hayes stumbled out of the mountains 3 days later, found by a hiking couple near the trailhead. He was hypothermic, dehydrated, and suffering from severe frostbite on his extremities. When they asked him what happened, he couldn't explain. The words wouldn't come. Everything was jumbled. Memories of stone structures, twilight that lasted forever, voices that echoed from the wrong direction. They got him to a hospital. The doctors treated his physical injuries but couldn't explain the discoloration on his arm. The skin there had a texture like granite, rough and cold to the touch. Carol Whitmore came to see him. "Where's Silas?" she asked. Markel opened his mouth to answer, but the words that came out weren't his own. "I'm right here." Carol's eyes widened. Because the voice was mine. Silas Brennan's voice coming from Markel's throat. "Don't leave me here," Markel said in my voice. "I want to go home." The doctors called it a psychological break. Trauma-induced identity confusion. They kept Markel under observation for 2 weeks. But Carol knew better. She'd seen too much in these mountains, heard too many stories that didn't make sense. She put Markel on extended medical leave and closed the trails near Mammoth Glacier. "Unstable geological conditions," the signs said. "Area closed until further notice." Markel eventually recovered, at least physically. The discoloration on his arm never went away, but it stopped spreading. He quit the Forest Service, moved to a city far from any mountains. But sometimes people who knew him would swear they heard him talking to himself. And the voice he used wasn't always his own. Sometimes it was mine. As for me, Silas Brennan, I was declared dead after a month. Lost in the wilderness, presumed fallen, body never recovered. Carol held a memorial service. My family came, my friends, other rangers who'd worked with me over the years. But Carol kept my office locked. She wouldn't let anyone use it, wouldn't let anyone go through my files. Because sometimes, late at night, she'd hear sounds coming from that locked office. The creak of a chair, the shuffle of papers, footsteps on the wood floor. And once she swore she heard my voice calling out, "Hello?" The echo came back wrong, from the wrong direction, arriving 5 seconds too late. She never went into that office again. The mountains still stand. The basin near Mammoth Glacier still exists, accessible to anyone with the determination to hike there. But if you go, be careful what you say. Be careful what you shout into the distance, because the echo might come back from the wrong direction. And it might not be your voice anymore. It might be mine, or Markel's, or any of the 30 other people whose markings cover the walls of that cave in the in-between place where stone structures learn to be human. We're all still there, in a way, trapped in the echoes, repeated endlessly, learning to speak with stolen voices. And we're waiting for the next ranger, the next hiker, the next curious soul who calls out to hear their voice bounce back. Waiting to answer, waiting to teach the mountains our words, our fears, our names, because that's what echoes do. They return, again and again, forever. Hello? Can you hear us? We're right behind you, speaking with your voice, saying things you haven't said yet. I want to go home. Something's wrong with the mountains. Don't leave me here. Listen carefully next time you're in high country. Listen for the echo that comes from the wrong direction. That's us. That's all of us. And someday it might be you too. My name is Ivy Callahan, and I need you to understand something about navigation in the wilderness. When you're 12,000 feet up in the Wind River Range, your compass, your GPS, your map, they're not suggestions. They're the only thing standing between you and dying alone on a mountain. I'd been a wilderness ranger for the Shoshone National Forest for 9 years. 9 years of maintaining trails, rescuing lost hikers, and teaching people that nature doesn't care about your Instagram feed. I knew these mountains. Every trail, every pass, every shortcut that wasn't on any map. Or so I thought. It started with Noah Pierce. He showed up at the ranger station in Dubois on a Tuesday morning in late July, looking like he'd hiked through hell, which, in a way, he had. "I need to report something," he said. His hands shook as he spread a map across my desk. "Something's wrong with the Divide Trail." I looked at the map. Standard USGS topo, well worn from use. The Continental Divide Trail was marked clearly, running north-south through some of the most remote country in Wyoming. "What kind of wrong?" I asked. Noah pointed to a section near Island Lake. I was doing a solo hike. 4 days out, 4 days back. I marked my route, followed the blazes on the trees. Everything was normal the first 2 days. And then, third morning, I broke camp and started following the trail markers. Same blazes I'd seen the day before, orange diamonds nailed to trees, but they were leading me in the wrong direction. "You got turned around. Happens to everyone sometimes." "No." His voice was sharp. I checked my compass. I checked my GPS. Both said I was going the right way according to my route. But the trail markers, the physical markers on the trees. They were pointing somewhere else. I studied him more carefully. Noah was maybe 40, fit, with the weathered look of someone who spent serious time outdoors. Not a novice. Not someone prone to panic. Show me exactly where this happened. He circled an area on the map. Here, between Island Lake and Titcomb Basin. I thought maybe vandals had moved the markers, but there were dozens of them, all pointing in a different direction than they had the day before. That doesn't make sense. Trail markers don't move. I know, but I'm telling you what I saw, and it gets stranger. He pulled out a GPS unit, turned it on, scrolled through the waypoints. Look at this. My track log for day 3. I looked at the screen. The GPS track showed Noah walking in a large circle, passing the same coordinates multiple times, even though according to his description he'd been walking in a straight line. GPS malfunction, I said. That's what I thought. So I pulled out my backup compass. It pointed north exactly where it should. But when I followed the compass north, the trail markers led me south. And you're sure you weren't experiencing altitude sickness, confusion, disorientation? Noah's jaw tightened. I've been to 20,000 feet in the Himalayas. I know what altitude sickness feels like. This wasn't that. I wanted to dismiss it. Equipment failure, user error, altitude-induced confusion, all more likely than trail markers physically moving overnight. But something in Noah's face stopped me. Did anything else unusual happen? He hesitated. The last night, I camped near Mistake Lake, set up my tent, built a fire, hung my bear bag. Normal routine. When I woke up the next morning, my tent had moved. You mean you got disoriented and my tent, the physical tent, with me sleeping in it, had moved about 50 yards from where I'd set it up. The fire ring was still in the original spot. My bear bag was still hanging from the same tree, but my tent was in a completely different location. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. That's impossible. I know, but that's when I decided to hike out. I didn't follow the trail markers anymore. I just used my GPS and compass and bushwhacked straight to the trailhead. I made Noah file an official report, documenting everything. Then I sent him home and told him we'd investigate. What I didn't tell him was that this was the third report I'd received in as many weeks. The first 2 had been less detailed, just hikers complaining that trails didn't seem right, or that they'd gotten lost despite following marked routes. I'd written them off as inexperienced hikers making mistakes, but Noah Pierce wasn't inexperienced, and the details he'd reported were too specific, too consistent to ignore. That afternoon, I went to see my supervisor, Dale Morrissey. He'd been with the Forest Service for 30 years, knew the Wind Rivers better than anyone alive. Dale, we've got a problem. I laid out the 3 reports. The inconsistent trail markers, the GPS anomalies, the tent that had somehow moved overnight. Dale listened without interrupting, his weathered face unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. You know what this sounds like, he finally said. Equipment failure, user error, altitude sickness. That's what it should be, but it's not. I stared at him. What do you mean? Dale pulled out an old file cabinet, dug through folders until he found what he was looking for. A yellowed incident report from 1987. Read this. The report described a ranger patrol near Titcomb Basin. The ranger, a man named Thomas Blackwood, had reported the same things. Trail markers pointing in wrong directions. GPS coordinates not matching physical locations. Campsites displaced overnight. Thomas Blackwood had been found 3 weeks later, 10 miles from where his last reported position. Dead from exposure, even though he'd been carrying full cold weather gear. His final journal entry was barely legible. The mountains are moving, or I am. Can't tell which. Followed the markers, but they led me in circles. The same lake, over and over. Different name on the map each time. Same water. How is that possible? Jesus, I whispered. There have been others, Dale said. Not many, maybe one every 10 years. Always in the same area, the high basins between Island Lake and Titcomb. Always the same reports. And sometimes people don't come back. Why didn't anyone investigate? They did, multiple times. Sent search teams, technical experts, even a geologist to check for magnetic anomalies. Found nothing. The trails are exactly where they should be. The markers all point the right directions. Whatever's happening, it doesn't happen when you're looking for it. So, what do we do? Dale closed the file. You go up there. Do a week-long patrol. Check every trail marker, every blaze, every cairn. Document everything. And maybe, you'll see what they saw. And if I do, then we'll finally have proof that something's happening up there, something we can't explain. I should have said no. Should have told Dale to send someone else, or better yet, to close the trails until we figured out what was going on. But I didn't, because I'd spent 9 years in these mountains, and I needed to understand. I left 3 days later, my pack loaded with more gear than I'd normally carry. 2 GPS units, 3 compasses, survey equipment, cameras. I was going to document everything, prove whatever was happening had a rational explanation. The trailhead at Elkhart Park sat at 9,200 feet, the start of a 20-mile trail into the high country. It was early morning, the air sharp and cold, the sky clear. Perfect conditions for a solo patrol. I signed in at the trailhead register, noted my planned route and expected return date. Then I started hiking. The first day was uneventful. The trail was clear, well-maintained, exactly as it should be. I checked my GPS regularly, matched my position to the map. Everything aligned perfectly. I camped that night at Photographer's Point, a popular site overlooking Seneca Lake. Set up my tent, filtered water, ate dinner while watching the sunset paint the peaks orange and gold. Before bed, I took photos of my campsite from multiple angles, marked the tent's position with my GPS, drove stakes with colored tape into the ground at each corner of my tent. If the tent moved, I'd know. I slept fitfully, waking several times to check my GPS, my compass, the stars overhead. Everything remained normal. The tent hadn't moved. My gear was exactly where I'd left it. In the morning, I checked the stakes, still in place, still forming the same rectangle around my tent. Whatever had happened to Noah and the others, it wasn't happening to me. Not yet. I continued hiking. The trail climbed steadily, gaining elevation as it wound through boulder fields and alpine meadows. I passed Island Lake around noon, a stunning turquoise pool surrounded by granite cliffs. And that's where I found the first inconsistency. There was a trail marker nailed to a tree at the north end of the lake, an orange diamond with an arrow, pointing east toward Titcomb Basin. I checked my map. According to the USGS topo, the trail should continue northeast from this point. The marker was pointing almost due east, at least 30 degrees off from where it should be. I pulled out my GPS. According to the satellite coordinates, the trail did run northeast. The marker was wrong, or the GPS was wrong. I stood there for 10 minutes, trying to reconcile what I was seeing. The marker was old, weathered, the kind that had been there for years. Not something recently placed by vandals or confused hikers, but it was definitely pointing in the wrong direction. I took photos from multiple angles, documented the GPS coordinates, made notes. Then I continued along the GPS-indicated route, not following the marker. An hour later, I found another marker. This one pointed northeast, exactly where it should. which meant the previous marker had been wrong. A mistake made during installation, maybe, or damage that had twisted it off course. Except when I turned to look back, I could see the first marker in the distance, and from this angle, it was clearly pointing directly at me. Straight northeast, the exact direction I'd just walked. I stood there, confused. From up close, the marker had been pointing east. From a distance, it looked like it pointed northeast. Optical illusion? Perspective distortion? I hiked back to the first marker, examined it carefully. The arrow painted on the diamond definitely pointed east. Not northeast. East. Then I backed away, keeping my eyes on the marker. At about 50 yards, the arrow seemed to shift. Not physically, the marker didn't move, but my perception of where it pointed changed. At a distance, it clearly indicated northeast. I documented this with photos and notes, though I wasn't sure what it meant. Some kind of visual anomaly? Something about the angle and the paint and the light that made the arrow appear to point different directions depending on where you stood. It was unsettling, but not impossible. The human eye could be tricked in all sorts of ways. I continued hiking, now obsessively documenting every trail marker I passed. Most were normal. A few showed the same strange property, appearing to point one direction up close, another direction from far away. By late afternoon, I reached Mistake Lake. This was where Noah had camped, where his tent had supposedly moved overnight. The lake sat in a high basin at 11,400 feet, surrounded by granite walls. It was stunning, crystal clear water reflecting the peaks, wildflowers blooming in improbable clusters between rocks. I found a flat spot for my tent, about 100 yards from the shore. Before setting up, I took detailed photos of the location from multiple angles. Then I used my GPS to mark the exact coordinates. This time, I didn't just stake the corners. I arranged rocks in a large circle around my tent site, each rock placed carefully. Each position documented with photos and GPS waypoints. If anything moved during the night, the tent, the rocks, anything, I would know. I built a fire as the sun set, the temperature dropping rapidly. At this elevation, even summer nights flirted with freezing. I ate dinner, made notes in my journal, checked my GPS compulsively. Everything was exactly where it should be. As darkness fell, I heard something. Voices, faint, coming from across the lake. I grabbed my flashlight, swept the beam across the water. Nothing. No tents, no campfires, no sign of other hikers. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed off the granite walls. Normal echo, coming from the right direction. Nothing like what Noah had described in his previous reports from different areas. The voices continued, too faint to make out words. Just the cadence of conversation, the rise and fall of questions and answers. I walked around the lake, searching, found nothing. The voices seemed to move as I moved, always staying just at the edge of hearing, always coming from somewhere else. Finally, I gave up. Acoustic anomaly, probably. Sound carrying from another valley, bouncing off the peaks in strange ways. These mountains were full of acoustic tricks. I returned to my tent. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a dull red glow across my camp, and the rocks had moved. Not dramatically, not thrown aside or scattered, but repositioned. Each rock was still roughly in the circle I'd made, but the spacing was different. The pattern had changed. I pulled out my GPS, checked the waypoints I'd marked for each rock. According to the coordinates, the rocks were still in their exact original positions. But they weren't. I could see that they weren't, which meant either my eyes were wrong or the GPS was wrong. I took new photos, comparing them to the ones I'd taken at sunset. In the photos, the rocks looked different, definitely repositioned. But the GPS insisted they hadn't moved. I spent an hour trying to figure it out, rechecking coordinates, re-examining the photos, measuring distances. Nothing made sense. Finally, exhausted and frustrated, I crawled into my tent, set an alarm for every 2 hours so I could check if anything else changed during the night. The first alarm went off at midnight. I unzipped my tent, swept my flashlight across the camp. Everything looked normal. The rocks were still in their modified circle. The fire was cold ash. My gear was where I'd left it. But something felt wrong. The air was too still, the silence too complete. Even the usual mountain sounds, wind, the distant cry of an eagle, the rustle of small animals, were absent. I checked my GPS. The coordinates said I was exactly where I should be. Mistake Lake, elevation 11,400 feet. But when I looked at the lake, it seemed different. The shape was wrong. Too round when I remembered it being more elongated. I checked my photos from earlier. In the photos, the lake was definitely elongated. Now it was round. I stared at it for a long time, trying to understand. Then I went back into my tent and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The second alarm went off at 2 a.m. I didn't leave the tent this time, just lay there, listening to the absolute silence, feeling the wrongness of the place pressing in. At 4 a.m. I heard footsteps outside my tent. Slow, deliberate steps, circling the tent. The crunch of boots on gravel. "Who's there?" I called out. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then they resumed, continuing their circuit around my tent. I grabbed my flashlight and bear spray, unzipped the tent door fast, swept the beam across the camp. Nothing. No one. Just empty darkness and my modified circle of rocks. But the footsteps continued. I could hear them clearly, right next to me, moving around the tent. I spun, trying to track the sound. The footsteps stayed behind me, always just out of sight, always circling. Then they stopped. And I heard my own voice. "Who's there?" The same words I'd spoken moments before. My voice, my inflection. But coming from outside the tent, from where the footsteps had been. I didn't sleep again. I sat in my tent until dawn, listening to phantom footsteps and my own voice echoing back at me from the darkness. When the sun finally rose, I crawled out of my tent to check the camp. The rocks had moved again, this time dramatically. They were no longer in a circle around my tent. They were arranged in a line, pointing directly at the lake. And my tent had shifted. Not much, maybe 10 feet, but enough that I was certain. The fire ring, which had been 20 feet from my tent door, was now 30 feet away. I checked my GPS. According to the coordinates, my tent was exactly where I'd set it up yesterday. The rocks were in their original positions. Nothing had moved. But it had. I could see that it had. Which meant the GPS was lying, or the world was changing and the GPS couldn't track it. I should have left right then. Packed up, hiked out, reported that Noah and the others were right. Something impossible was happening in these mountains. But I didn't leave. Because I'm a ranger, and rangers don't run from mysteries. We solved them. I spent the morning documenting everything. Photos from every angle, GPS waypoints, measurements. Then I broke camp and continued north toward Titcomb Basin. According to my map, it was a 6-mile hike. According to my GPS, it was 5 miles. That discrepancy bothered me, but maps and GPS rarely agreed perfectly. What bothered me more was that the trail markers were becoming increasingly inconsistent. Every orange diamond I passed pointed in a slightly different direction than it should. Not wildly off, just 5 or 10 degrees wrong. Enough that if you followed them without checking compass or GPS, you'd slowly drift off course. I documented each one. By noon, I'd found 17 markers, and every single one was off by at least 5 degrees. Some by as much as 20. But here's the strange part. When I looked back at markers I'd passed earlier, they seemed to be pointing the right direction now, like they were correcting themselves after I'd moved past. I stopped at one marker, took a photo, walked 50 yards past it, looked back and took another photo. In the first photo, the arrow pointed east-southeast. In the second photo, taken from behind, the arrow pointed east-northeast. The same marker, 2 different directions. Impossible unless the marker was physically rotating. I hiked back to it. Up close, it pointed east-southeast again. I touched the marker, tried to move it. Solid, nailed firmly to the tree. No way it could rotate on its own. I sat down and stared at it for 20 minutes, trying to figure out if this was an optical illusion, a trick of perspective, or something else. Finally, I had an idea. I set up a camera on a tripod, aimed at the marker. Set it to take a photo every 30 seconds for the next hour. Then I hiked past the marker, about 100 yards, and stopped. Waited for an hour. When I retrieved the camera and reviewed the images, my hands started shaking. The marker had rotated. Not suddenly. Gradually, over the course of the hour, the arrow had turned from east-southeast to northeast. About 45 degrees of rotation, but it hadn't spun. The images showed no motion. Each frame was a still photo of the marker, perfectly motionless. But frame by frame, the arrow pointed in a different direction, like the rotation was happening between frames, in the gaps between moments. I checked the GPS coordinates of where I was standing. The numbers were fluctuating slightly. The last digit kept changing, switching between 3 and 7, back and forth, like the GPS couldn't decide exactly where I was. My compass was no help. The needle spun lazily, unable to find north. I pulled out my backup compass. Same thing, spinning slowly, never settling. Magnetic anomaly? But I wasn't near any lodestone deposits, no iron-rich formations that would affect a compass. I tried my phone. No signal, normal at this elevation, but the phone's internal compass app showed the same spinning needle. I was losing my navigation tools. One by one, they were failing. All I had left was the map. Paper, waterproof, the kind that couldn't malfunction or lie. Except when I unfolded the map, something was wrong. The trails were different. Not dramatically, not completely redrawn, but shifted. The Continental Divide Trail, which I knew ran in a straight line through this section, now showed several switchbacks that hadn't been there before. Mistake Lake, where I'd camped last night, was marked in a different location on the map, about half a mile east of where it should be. I pulled out the photocopy of the map I'd brought as a backup. The same changes were on it. Impossible. Maps don't change. They're printed, fixed, permanent. Unless I was remembering wrong. Unless my memory of the trails was incorrect. But I'd been hiking these mountains for 9 years. I knew this map by heart. I checked my emergency location. The GPS, still flickering between numbers, suggested I was near Titcomb Basin, but the map, with its newly drawn switchbacks, suggested I was still miles away. I needed to reach Titcomb Basin. It was the only ranger station in this part of the wilderness, a small cabin where rangers could shelter during patrols. If I could get there, I could radio for help, report what was happening. I started hiking again, following the trail markers despite their inconsistency. Without GPS or compass, they were all I had. The markers led me north, then east, then south, then north again. I should have been climbing toward the basin. Instead, I was walking in what felt like circles. After 3 hours, I saw Mistake Lake ahead of me. The lake I'd left that morning, 6 miles behind me, but my legs ached. I'd been hiking uphill for hours. I'd gained elevation. I could feel it in my lungs, in the thinning air. And yet, here was Mistake Lake right in front of me. I checked my GPS. It said I'd traveled 5.2 miles. My position was marked as being at Titcomb Basin, but I was looking at Mistake Lake. I could see the spot where I'd camped, the circle of rocks that had moved during the night. Except the rocks were in a different arrangement now. Not a circle, not a line, a spiral, tightening inward toward where my tent had been. I sat down, forced myself to breathe slowly. Altitude sickness could cause confusion, hallucinations, but I felt fine. No headache, no nausea, no shortness of breath beyond what was normal at 11,400 feet. I pulled out my journal, made myself write down what I was experiencing. The act of writing helped, made it real, made it something I could analyze later when I was out of the mountains. Day 3, 14 o'clock hours. Trail markers rotating, compass not functioning. GPS shows conflicting coordinates. Map has changed. I hiked north for 3 hours and arrived back where I started. This is not altitude sickness. This is not equipment failure. Something is fundamentally wrong with how space works in this area. As I wrote, I heard voices again. The same faint conversation I'd heard the night before, coming from across the lake. This time, I could make out words. Following the markers, 6 miles, but we're still the same lake again. How is that? Multiple voices. At least 3 different people, maybe more. All of them confused, all of them lost. I stood up, called out. "Hello! Where are you?" The voices stopped. Then, after a long silence, one of them called back. "Where are you?" It was my voice, my exact words. But I hadn't said them as a question. The other voice had changed the inflection, made it a question instead of a statement. "I'm at Mistake Lake," I called. "Are you lost?" Another silence. Then multiple voices, all speaking at once, overlapping. "I'm at Mistake Lake. Are you lost? Where are you?" Following the markers. All in my voice, all using my words, but jumbled, rearranged, like someone had cut up my sentences and played them back in random order. I started walking around the lake toward where the voices seemed to originate. But as I moved, they moved too, staying always at the far side, always just out of reach. Finally, I stopped. "If you can hear me, meet me at the north end of the lake. I'll wait here." I waited for an hour. The voices continued their confused conversation, but no one appeared. No hikers, no tents, no sign of other people. Just voices, using my words, speaking in my voice. As the sun began to set, I made a decision. I was going to camp here again, at Mistake Lake, and this time I was going to stay awake all night and watch what happened. I set up my tent in a new location on the opposite side of the lake from where I'd camped before. This time, I didn't arrange rocks in a circle. Instead, I spray painted a large X on a flat boulder, marked the GPS coordinates, took photos. If the boulder moved, or if the X somehow changed, I'd have proof that objects were being displaced overnight. I didn't build a fire. Fire creates light, and light ruins night vision. I wanted to be able to see in the darkness, to watch what happened when the world changed. As twilight deepened, I sat outside my tent, wrapped in my sleeping bag, and waited. The stars came out. Thousands of them, the Milky Way a bright river across the sky. I tried to identify constellations, Ursa Major, Cassiopeia, Orion, but they were wrong. Not dramatically wrong, just shifted. The Big Dipper's handle bent at a slightly different angle. Cassiopeia's W was more like a V. I pulled out my star chart app on my phone. The app showed the constellations where they should be, matching my memory, matching astronomical tables. But when I looked up at the actual sky, the stars were in different positions. The app was showing me what should be there. The sky was showing me what was there, and they didn't match. Around midnight, the voices started again, louder this time, clearer, coming from the lake itself. I stood up, walked to the water's edge. The surface was perfectly calm, reflecting the wrong stars. The voices were coming from the water. From beneath the surface, I knelt, put my ear close to the lake. Could hear them clearly now. Multiple conversations, overlapping, all using my voice. The tent moved 50 yards, markers pointing wrong direction. Walked in circles for 3 hours. Stars don't match the chart. They were repeating things I'd said. Things I'd written in my journal. Things I'd thought but never spoken aloud. "How can you hear my thoughts?" I whispered to the water. The voices paused. Then, in unison, they answered. "How can you hear my thoughts?" Not mocking, not questioning, just repeating, like they were trying to understand what the words meant. I backed away from the water, returned to my tent, zipped myself inside and put in earplugs to block out the voices. But I could still hear them, muffled but present. Conversations in my voice, using my words, speaking my memories. At 2 a.m., the tent started moving. Not suddenly, gradually. I could feel it sliding across the ground inch by inch, being pulled somewhere. I unzipped the door, looked out. My tent was in the same position as before. The X on the boulder was still visible in the starlight, still the same distance away. But I could feel the motion. The tent sliding, rotating, being repositioned. I grabbed my GPS. The coordinates were changing rapidly, the numbers flickering so fast I couldn't read them. Then they stopped. Stabilized at a new position. I was, according to the GPS, 3 miles away from where I'd set up camp. But the X on the boulder was right there, 20 feet away, exactly where it should be. I took photos. In the photos, the tent appeared to be in a different location than where I could see it with my eyes. The GPS said one thing, my eyes said another. The photos said a third thing. 3 different versions of reality, none of them agreeing. At 4 a.m. I saw them. Figures moving in the darkness. Human-shaped, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, moving with joints that bent in impossible ways. They circled the lake slowly. I counted 7 of them. Each one moved independently, but they maintained a perfect circle, keeping the same distance from the lake shore. I grabbed my camera, tried to photograph them, but in the photos they didn't appear. Just empty darkness where I could clearly see them with my eyes. I tried the night vision setting. Nothing. Thermal imaging, nothing. The figures were invisible to cameras, visible only to human eyes. As I watched, one of them stopped, turned to face my tent. Even though I couldn't see a face, just a silhouette in starlight, I knew it was looking at me. It raised one arm, pointed at me. The other figures stopped circling. All of them turned to face me. All of them pointed. Then they started moving toward my tent. I should have run, should have grabbed my gear and bolted into the darkness. But I was frozen, watching them approach with their impossible joints and their too long limbs. They reached my tent, surrounded it. I could see them through the mesh door, standing in a circle, all pointing inward at me. Then they spoke, all of them together in perfect unison, in my voice. "You don't belong here." I couldn't respond, couldn't move, just watched as they stood there pointing, speaking with my stolen voice. "This place is not for you. The markers will always lead you back. The map will always change. You cannot leave. You are lost. You are lost. "You are lost," the last phrase repeated, overlapping, each voice starting a fraction of a second after the one before, creating a cascade of my own voice telling me I was lost. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, the figures were gone, melted into darkness, leaving me alone in my tent with my racing heart and the absolute certainty that they were right. I was lost, completely, impossibly lost, and I had no idea how to find my way out. I didn't sleep the rest of that night, just sat in my tent, clutching my bear spray like it would help against things that didn't show up in photographs. Dawn came slowly, the false dawn, then the gray light, then finally the sun cresting the peaks to the east, or what I assumed was east. I had no working compass to confirm it. When there was enough light to see clearly, I crawled out of my tent and checked the boulder with the painted X. The X was gone. The boulder was there, same size, same shape, same location. But the spray paint had vanished. No residue, no faint marks. Just clean granite, like I'd never marked it at all. I checked my photos from the previous evening. They clearly showed the X. Bright orange paint, clearly visible. But the boulder was unmarked. I spray painted a new X, watched it for 5 minutes to make sure it wouldn't disappear immediately. The paint stayed bright and obvious against the gray stone. Then I packed my tent. I was done with Mistake Lake. Done with camping in a place where reality rearranged itself overnight. I needed to reach the Titcomb Ranger Cabin, 4 miles north according to the original map. Unknown distance according to the changed map. But it was my only goal now. Reach shelter, radio for help, get out of the mountains. I started hiking north, following the trail markers despite knowing they couldn't be trusted. After an hour, I found something new. A trail marker I'd never seen before. Not an orange diamond, but a cairn. A stack of rocks built as a trail indicator in areas above tree line. The cairn was large, maybe 5 feet tall, built from carefully balanced stones, and it was new. I'd hiked this section of trail dozens of times. There had never been a cairn here. I checked my GPS. The coordinates showed I was on the main trail, exactly where I should be. But the trail marker was new. I took photos, documented the location, then continued past it. 20 minutes later, I found another new cairn. Same size, same construction style. This one had something different. A small object placed on top of the stone pile. My spray paint can, the same one I'd used to mark the boulder. I'd had it in my pack. I checked, yes, it was missing. But how had it gotten here? How had it moved from my pack to the top of a cairn without me noticing? I picked it up. The can was empty now. Completely empty, though it had been half full when I'd used it that morning. I looked back at the first cairn, the one I'd passed 20 minutes ago. From this angle, I could see something on top of it too. Something I hadn't noticed before. I hiked back, climbed carefully to examine the top of the cairn. My GPS unit. The primary one, the one I'd been checking constantly. I checked my pack. The GPS pocket was empty. The unit had somehow moved from my pack to this cairn without me feeling it, noticing it, or remembering it. Objects were being moved, taken from my pack, placed on cairns that hadn't existed before. I collected the GPS, clipped it securely to my belt this time. Continued hiking. The trail climbed steadily. I should have been ascending toward Titcomb Basin, gaining elevation with every step. But my altimeter showed I was descending, down from 11,400 feet to 11,200, then 11,000. Impossible. I was walking uphill. I could feel the grade, feel my legs working against gravity, but the altimeter said I was going down. Around noon, I reached what should have been Titcomb Basin. It wasn't a basin, it was a lake. The same lake. Mistake Lake. I'd walked for 4 hours, climbed what felt like 2,000 feet, followed the trail north the entire way, and I was back at Mistake Lake. This time there were 2 tents set up on the shore. Mine, which I'd packed up hours ago and carried on my back, and another tent I didn't recognize. I dropped my pack, approached the unknown tent. "Hello? Anyone here?" No answer. I circled the tent. It was zipped shut. No sounds from inside. I knocked on the tent pole. "I'm a park ranger. Is anyone in there?" Still nothing. Finally, I unzipped the door and looked inside. The tent was empty, but someone had been camping here. Sleeping bag laid out, backpack in the corner, personal items scattered around. I checked the backpack, found a wallet, opened it. The driver's license showed my face, my name, Ivy Callahan, but it wasn't my wallet. My wallet was in my pocket. I pulled out my wallet to compare. Same license, same photos, same credit cards. 2 identical wallets, both belonging to me. In the backpack, I found a journal, opened it to the last entry. Day 3. I've been walking in circles. No matter which direction I go, I end up back at this lake. The trail markers keep changing. The map keeps changing. I think I'm trapped here. I think I've been trapped here for longer than I remember. Tonight, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to stay awake and watch what happens. Maybe if I see how the world changes, I can figure out how to change it back. The handwriting was mine, but I hadn't written this. My journal was in my pack with different entries. I checked my pack, found my journal. The last entry was about the figures I'd seen during the night, about their impossible joints and their stolen voices. 2 journals, both mine, both describing different versions of the same experience. Then I looked at my tent, the one I'd supposedly packed up hours ago. It was still set up exactly where I'd left it the previous evening, the spot where it had been before it moved during the night. But I'd packed it, I'd carried it. It was in my backpack right now. I checked my pack. The tent was there, compressed in its stuff sack. So there were 2 tents, both mine, one set up on the shore, one in my pack. I sat down, forced myself to think. There were 2 explanations. 1, I was hallucinating. Altitude sickness, dehydration, psychological breakdown. None of this was real. 2, there were multiple versions of me in this place. Multiple Ivies, all trapped at Mistake Lake, all experiencing slightly different versions of the same impossible situation. I didn't like either explanation. I checked the GPS again. The coordinates showed I was at Titcomb Basin. Elevation 11 is 720 feet, 4 miles north of Mistake Lake. But I was looking at Mistake Lake. I was at Mistake Lake. The GPS was showing me where I should be, not where I was. Or maybe it was showing me where I was in some other version of reality. A version where I'd successfully hiked to Titcomb Basin. A version that existed parallel to this one. I pulled out my radio, emergency channel, maximum power, keyed the mic. "This is Ranger Callahan calling any station. I need immediate assistance. Do you copy?" Static. Then, after a delay, a response. "This is Ranger Callahan calling any station. I need immediate assistance. Do you copy?" My voice, my exact words, played back to me with perfect fidelity. "Who is this?" I demanded. "Who is this? Stop repeating me. Stop repeating me." I threw the radio into the lake, watched it sink into the clear water, disappearing into the depths. Then I heard a splash behind me, turned around. My radio was lying on the shore, wet, dripping, but intact. I hadn't imagined throwing it. The lake showed ripples where it had sunk, but now it was back on the shore like it had never left. Objects couldn't be gotten rid of. They just returned. I was trapped in a loop. Every action I took was somehow undone, reset, returned to its starting position. As the sun began to set, too fast, the day passing in what felt like hours instead of a full rotation, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned, saw someone hiking down the trail toward the lake. It was me, same clothes, same pack, same exhausted expression. The other Ivy, the one whose tent and journal I'd found, was returning to camp. She saw me, stopped walking, stared. "You're not supposed to be here," she said. "Neither are you," I replied. We stood there, two versions of the same person, looking at each other across an impossible distance. "How long have you been here?" I asked. "I don't know. Days? Weeks? Time doesn't work right. I keep trying to leave, but I always end up back here." "Me too. This is my third day. Or I think it's my third day. I'm on day 12, she said. Or maybe day 3. The days keep repeating. I'm not sure anymore." She walked closer. I could see now that she looked older than me. Not by much, maybe a few years, but with the weathered look of someone who'd been outdoors too long. Her clothes were more worn. Her face was thinner. "I think we're in different time loops," she said. "Different versions of the same loop. You're earlier in yours, I'm later in mine, but we're both trapped. How do we get out?" "I don't know. I've tried everything. Following the markers, they just lead in circles. Ignoring the markers and bushwhacking, you end up back at the lake. Even if you hike for days without sleeping, you wake up at the lake anyway." "Wake up? But you said you weren't sleeping." "Exactly. You just lose time. Suddenly it's later or earlier and you're back here." Behind her, I saw more figures emerging from the trees. More Ivies. At least 5 of them, maybe more. All different ages, all different levels of wear and exhaustion. "We're all you," the first one said. "All trapped at different points in the loop. Some of us have been here for what feels like months. Some are just arriving. But we're all the same person, all experiencing the same trap." The Ivies gathered around the lake shore. I counted 9 of them. 9 versions of myself, all lost in the mountains, all unable to escape. "What happens if we all leave together?" I asked. "If we all hike out at the same time, following the same route?" "We tried that," one of the older Ivies said. She looked years older than me, with gray in her hair and deep lines around her eyes. "We all left together, hiked for 2 days straight. When we stopped to rest, we were still at the lake, and 3 of us were missing. Missing where? We don't know. They just stopped existing. One moment they were there, the next they were gone, like the loops collapsed and erased them." I felt panic rising. "So there's no way out?" "There might be one way," the oldest Ivy said. She looked ancient now, decades older than me, bent with age. "But I haven't been brave enough to try it." "What is it?" "The lake. The voices come from the lake. The changes happen near the lake. I think the lake is the center, the source. If you go into it, all the way in, down to the bottom, you might find the way out. Or you might drown. Or you might drown." We all stood there in silence, 9 versions of the same person, all contemplating the same impossible choice. Then the oldest Ivy stepped forward. "I'll do it. I've been here the longest. I've tried everything else. Might as well try this." She walked to the water's edge, didn't hesitate, just waded in. The water was freezing. I could see her gasp as it reached her waist, but she kept going. When the water was up to her neck, she turned back to look at us. "If this works, you'll know. If it doesn't, try to find another way." Then she ducked under the surface and disappeared. We waited. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. She didn't resurface. After 10 minutes, I waded in to search for her. But the lake was impossibly deep. My feet couldn't find the bottom, even right at the shore. She was gone. "Did it work?" one of the younger Ivies asked. "Did she get out?" "I don't know," I said. But then I felt it. A shift, a change in the air, in the light, in the pressure of reality. The tents on the shore, all of them, started to fade. Not disappear, just become translucent. Like they were no longer fully anchored to this place. "It's working," someone said. The other Ivies started fading too, becoming transparent, their bodies less solid. I looked down at my own hands. They were fading as well. I could see through my fingers to the ground beneath. "We're being pulled out," one of the Ivies said. "The loops are collapsing. We're all converging back into one timeline." The sensation was disorienting. Being in multiple places at once, seeing through multiple pairs of eyes, feeling multiple versions of my body overlapping. Then, with a snap like a rubber band breaking, everything collapsed into singularity. I was alone on the shore of Mistake Lake. One tent, one pack, one version of myself. The sun was setting, but it was setting at the right speed now. Normal time. Real time. I checked my GPS. The coordinates were steady. The elevation reading made sense. The map in my pack showed trails in their original positions. Everything was back to normal. I packed up my camp quickly, started hiking. Didn't stop until I was 5 miles away from Mistake Lake, safely below tree line, camped in a meadow where the world followed reasonable rules. That night, I radioed Dale, told him I was coming out early, told him I'd file a full report when I got back. I didn't tell him what had happened. Didn't tell him about the loops, the multiple versions of myself, the impossible lake that trapped time. I would tell him eventually. But first, I needed to figure out how to explain it in a way that wouldn't get me put on psychiatric leave. Epilogue. 800 words. 3 days later, I walked into Dale's office and handed him my report. 20 pages, single-spaced, documenting everything. He read it in silence. When he finished, he looked up at me. "You know how this sounds." "I know, but it's what happened. Ivy, we could explain this as altitude sickness, dehydration, psychological stress, all reasonable possibilities. But it's not what happened." Dale was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out that old file again, the one from 1987. "Thomas Blackwood's final entry," he said. "He wrote something we never included in the official report. Want to know what it was?" I nodded. Dale read from the yellowed paper. "I saw myself today. Multiple versions, all at the same lake. We spoke. They told me they'd been trapped for weeks, months, years. I don't know if I'm the original or just another copy. I don't know if any of us are real, but I know I can't stay here. Tomorrow I'm going into the lake. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out. Close this area. Don't let anyone else get trapped." "He tried the same thing," I whispered. "And he didn't make it out. But you did." "The oldest version of me did it. She went into the lake and collapsed the loops. I don't know if she survived or if she just ceased to exist. Do you think you could find your way back? To that specific lake?" I thought about it. Maybe, if I wanted to. "Do you want to?" "No. God, no." Dale closed the file. "Then we're closing that section of the wilderness. Titcomb Basin, Mistake Lake, the whole area. We'll call it ecological sensitivity. Give the bighorn sheep some protected habitat. And if someone asks questions, let them ask. We're not going to answer." That was 3 months ago. The area is closed now. Big signs at every trailhead. Area closed. No entry. Violators will be prosecuted. Most hikers respect it. Some don't. We catch them occasionally, give them citations, escort them out. But sometimes hikers don't come back. They go into the closed area and just disappear. Their cars stay at the trailhead for weeks. Search and rescue finds nothing. I know where they are. They're at a lake that doesn't appear on any map, walking in loops that might last days or months or years, meeting versions of themselves that got lost earlier or later in the same impossible trap. And maybe, if they're brave enough or desperate enough, they'll go into the water and collapse the loops and find their way back to the real world. Or maybe they'll just stay there forever. Another voice in the lake, another version of themselves split across fractured time. I don't go back up there. Don't even hike in that part of the range anymore. There are other mountains, other trails, other places where reality follows reliable rules. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the oldest version of myself, the one who'd been trapped for what felt like years, who'd aged decades while stuck in that loop. She saved me by going into that lake, by being brave enough to try the one thing no one else had dared. Is she still out there somewhere, living another life? Or did she cease to exist when the loops collapsed? I'll never know. What I do know is this. There are places in these mountains where the rules break down, where space folds back on itself and time becomes a circle, where you can walk for days and end up where you started. The maps don't show these places. The GPS coordinates don't account for them. They exist in the gaps, in the thin spaces where reality wears through. And if you're not careful, if you follow the wrong trail marker or camp at the wrong lake, you might find yourself trapped in one of those gaps, walking in circles, meeting yourself coming back, watching the map change while you sleep. If that happens, remember what I learned. The only way out is through. Straight through the heart of whatever's holding you there. It might kill you, but staying trapped forever is worse. And if you see trail markers that point in impossible directions, if your GPS keeps returning to the same coordinates, if you wake up and your camp has moved overnight, run. Get out of the mountains as fast as you can, because some places don't want to let you go. And some loops never end. 6 months after I filed my report, I received a package at the ranger station. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. My handwriting. Inside was a journal, old, weathered, the pages water-stained and brittle. I opened it carefully, already knowing what I would find. Day 47. Or is it day 3 again? I've lost count. The loops are getting shorter. Sometimes I wake up and it's the same morning I just lived through. Sometimes I skip ahead weeks. There are 12 of me now. We've stopped trying to leave. We just exist at the lake, waiting for something to change. Day 89. One of the younger versions tried to hike out alone. She made it 3 miles before she appeared back at camp, unconscious. When she woke up, she couldn't remember her own name. The loops are taking more than just our location now. They're taking our identities. Day 134. I've figured something out. The lake isn't trapping us. We're trapping ourselves. Every time we try to leave, we create a new loop. Every time we panic, we branch off into another timeline. The only way out is to stop fighting. To accept. Day 187. I'm the oldest now. The others are fading. Not disappearing, just becoming less real. Translucent. I think I'm becoming the anchor point, the primary version. When I go into the lake, all the others will collapse back into me. All those days, all those loops, all those versions of myself, they'll all become one again. If you're reading this, future me, it means it worked. It means I made it out. But I need you to know something. We're not free. We'll never be completely free. Part of us is still at that lake. Part of us will always be trapped in those loops. You'll feel it sometimes. A displacement, a moment where you're not quite sure what day it is or whether you've lived through this moment before. That's the loops bleeding through. That's the lake calling back. Don't go back. Whatever you do, don't go back to find answers. There are no answers there. Only more questions. Only more versions of yourself, lost in infinite regression. Stay away from Mistake Lake. Stay away from anywhere the trail markers spin. Stay away from places where your GPS shows you're somewhere you're not. And if you ever feel yourself slipping, if reality starts to feel thin, if time starts to loop, go into water. Any water, lakes, rivers, streams, water is the boundary. Water is the way through. Good luck. We're going to need it. Ivy, the one who stayed. I closed the journal and sat there for a long time. The handwriting was definitely mine. The details matched my memories perfectly. But I didn't remember writing this. I didn't remember living through 187 days at Mistake Lake, which meant this journal came from a different version of me. One who didn't make it out. One who's still there, living through loops, sending messages to other timelines. Or maybe it came from the future. From a version of me who goes back. Who can't resist the pull of that lake and those impossible trails. I don't know which possibility scares me more. What I do know is that the journal is real. The paper is real. The words are real. And sometimes, late at night, I feel it. That displacement. That sense of living through the same moment twice. I'll be doing something ordinary. Making coffee. Filling out paperwork. Talking to a hiker. And suddenly I'll know with absolute certainty that I've done this before. Exactly this. Same words, same movements, same outcome. Is that just déjà vu? Normal memory glitches? Or is it the loops bleeding through? I keep the journal locked in my desk. Don't show it to anyone. Don't talk about it. Dale knows it exists. I had to tell him, but we've agreed never to discuss it. Because if we acknowledge it, if we try to investigate it, we might create another loop, another branch, another version of reality where rangers keep getting lost at Mistake Lake. Better to let it be. Better to keep the area closed. Better to let the mountain keep its secrets. But I know the truth now. Those secrets are me. All those lost rangers, all those disappeared hikers, they're not dead. They're not gone. They're trapped in loops, living the same days over and over, meeting versions of themselves, trying desperately to find a way out that doesn't exist. And somewhere in those loops, there's a version of me who's still there, who's been there for months, years, maybe decades in subjective time. She's waiting, writing in journals that somehow make it to other timelines, sending warnings that arrive too late or too early, or in the wrong version of reality. And someday, maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, I might feel the pull strong enough that I go back. I might walk up to Mistake Lake with full knowledge of what waits there. Might step into those loops deliberately, looking for the version of me who's still trapped. Might try to save her. Or might just become another iteration, another Ivy lost in infinite regression. I hope I'm strong enough to resist. Hope I never go back. But I keep my hiking gear ready. Keep my pack stocked with supplies. Just in case. Because some loops you can escape, and some you carry with you forever.